Good evening, friend, and welcome back. It is a real comfort to have you with us again tonight. Let the head settle deep into the pillow. The hands can grow quiet in the sheets. The eyes may close whenever they are ready, because the story will find you either way. We are in Newport, Rhode Island on a winter night, in the first years of the 20th century, standing on the frozen lawn of a house called the Elms. It is a marble French pavilion set in 12 acres of gardens on Bellevue Avenue, built in 1901 for a coalman and his wife. There is not a wagon on the drive, not a light in any upstairs window. The family are away. Yet, if you were to stand very still, you would feel the ground under your boots is warm. Not the ordinary warm of the earth, the warm of something quietly working underneath. 40 servants keep this house in season, and half that number keep it through the winter, and tonight they are all around us in the dark doing their work. There is a hidden tunnel beneath your feet, and men in it wheeling coal. If this kind of quiet history is a good place to fall asleep, a subscribe and a like help these long histories find the people who want them, but please do not do it now. In the morning is fine. Tell me down in the comments where in the world you are listening from tonight, and what time it is there. I picture someone in a cold bedroom in the north of England, one lamp on, and someone in the cab of a long truck on a dark road across Montana. Now dim the lights. Let the fan hum. Come with me, all the way back to Newport in 1901 and down, quietly into the warm dark beneath the elms. It is a little after 5 in the afternoon in Newport, Rhode Island, on a winter day near the end of the year. The sky has gone from grey to a deeper grey. The sea a mile to the south has slipped out of sight in the failing light. The wind is off the Atlantic, and it has that clean cold smell that a New England coast keeps for the winter alone. On the eastern edge of the town, along a strip of track that leaves the main coastal line at a quiet junction, a small string of hopper cars is being pushed slowly forward by a switching engine. The line is the Newport and Providence Railroad, later folded into the New York, New Haven and Hartford. The spur that leaves it runs in a gentle curve across Dixon Street on a private crossing of the estate's own making, and ends in a small below-grade yard on the service side of the property. 4 cars are in the string tonight, maybe 5. Their sides are lettered with the name of a coal company from Pennsylvania. Their hoppers are full and heaped, banked up in dull black mounds against the grey air. The switcher is a small tank engine, low and squat, and it takes the string in at a walking pace. The engineer leans out of the cab in a canvas coat watching the crossing. Let us say his name was Frank. He has been on this run for years, and he could bring these cars in with his eyes closed if the rules allowed it. He does not bring them in with his eyes closed. He brings them in at a walking pace, on a private crossing, on a scheduled hour, and he watches the road as if a summer horse and trap might come along it, though there will be no such traffic tonight. The reason he brings them in at this hour is a small kindness of the schedule. In the eyes of the house, the sight and the sound of a train are not what an evening on the terrace should hear. So the master's rule, and the railroad's contract, is that no train movement disturbs a summer evening at the Elms. All heavy delivery is done in the late afternoon, before the family sit down. Even in winter, when the family are away and no one is on the terrace to be disturbed, the rule holds. A rule kept in the empty months is a rule that will still be kept when the house is full. So the cars come in at 5. The switcher noses them down the spur, into the yard, past the hedge that screens the yard from the drive. There is a small brake shack at the end of the track. There is a chute of iron, canted, from which coal will be shot down into carts. There is a low platform of stone dusted with black. And there is the sound of the tank engine easing off, the sound of coupling settling one against the next, the small hiss of steam venting from a relief valve on the boiler, the ring of iron on iron. Frank climbs down. He walks the length of the string, checking each hopper. He knocks on the wooden side of a car and listens for the dull sound of a full hopper against the hollow sound of an empty one. He turns a coupling pin. He speaks to no one, because there is no one to speak to. He signals to the fireman in the cab. The switcher's lamps swing. Then the switcher uncouples from the string, backs off along the spur and puffs away in a slow chuff and a smaller cloud of white steam up the coastal line, back toward the harbour, back toward the roundhouse. The lamps of the switcher swing and dim and are gone. The sound of it takes another minute to fade. Then the yard is quiet. 4 heaped hoppers of soft bituminous coal stand in the dusk, waiting to be wheeled, load by load, down a tunnel and into a warm marble house. Somewhere, invisible above the hedge, a lit window is on in a caretaker's room. Nothing else moves. We can stand here a moment. The coal is quiet. It gives off in the cold a faint sweet smell, the smell of good bituminous coal from Winburn, Pennsylvania. Coal the master's own company took out of the ground. Coal that has ridden a train across Pennsylvania and into Philadelphia and up the coast to Providence and down along this final spur, and its whole long journey is over now, at this stone platform, on a Newport lawn, in the failing light of a winter day. It is exactly where it has been sent to be. The house it will heat is 100 yards off, on the other side of a low hedge, and even from here you can feel it. There is no light in an upstairs window, because the family are away in New York for the winter. There is only the softest glow from a lower story, the caretaker's window burning steadily against the dark. And under the lawn, under the perfect flat lawn that runs between the yard and the house, the tunnel is already lit. A string of small incandescent bulbs is burning along its brick vault, a plain workman's light for a plain workman's road. The cart is already at the yard end of the tunnel. 2 men are with it. They have been waiting for the last car. The wind picks up a fraction and then dies. Off to the south, the sea is only a slow distant breath. The failing sky closes over the yard, and now the last light is off the water, and we can turn quietly and go the way the coal is about to go, down into the warm dark under the lawn. The mouth of the tunnel is a small plain thing. It sits in the wall of the below-grade yard at the foot of the coal chute, and it is faced in the same red brick that runs all the way through to the far end. Above the arch there is nothing marked. No sign, no plaque, no name. The men who built the tunnel and the men who work it do not need to see it named. The men who live in the marble house 100 yards off have never stood in the yard to see it, and they have no need to name it either. Yet inside, when you step in from the yard, the first thing you feel is the light. A string of small incandescent bulbs is set into simple porcelain sockets along the crown of the vault about every 15 feet, and they burn steadily. There is no flicker, there is no hiss of gas. The tunnel is one of the earliest and least noticed of the Elms' small electric marvels, and it was wired from the day the house opened. It is a plain workman's light for a plain workman's road, warmer than the winter dusk outside, and it lays a soft yellow along the brick. The second thing you feel is the temperature. Outside, the yard is well below freezing. Inside the tunnel, after only a few paces, the air is milder. 20 feet in, it is noticeably warmer. 50 feet in, it is what you might call comfortable. This is not by any warming of the tunnel itself, because the tunnel has no radiator and no heat of its own. It is because, at the far end, some 150 feet away, there is the boiler room of the house, and the boiler room is a low, whitewashed vault kept always at a steady 85 degrees Fahrenheit or thereabouts, and its warmth drifts back down the tunnel with the patient certainty of warm air seeking cold. The tunnel is a chimney in reverse. It is a warm road under a cold lawn. The tunnel runs straight, or nearly straight, from the yard, under Dixon Street, under the sunken garden, and into the coal vault beneath the north wing of the house. About 150 feet, all told. It is wide enough for a small cart and for 2 men to walk beside it, 1 on each side. The floor is set with 2 thin iron rails, spaced narrow, gauged just for the pushcart. The walls, waist high on either side, are stacked with the coal already delivered on other days, banked in tidy black slopes so a man can shovel from them if the yard runs low. The cart is small and iron. 4 wheels, iron. A box in the middle, iron. A long wooden handle at each end so a man at either end can steer. one pushing and one pulling if the load is heavy. It is painted black. It is about 3 feet across and 5 feet long. It carries several £100 of coal at a time, and no more, because more than that would break a man's back to steer. 2 men are with the cart tonight. Let us say one of them is John. He's in his 40s. He is Irish-American, born in Newport, the son of parents who came from Cork in the 1860s. He was a quarry hand for years at the granite works up the coast at Rockport, and he came home to Newport when his mother was ill and stayed. He has worked in this tunnel for 4 winters now. The other man is younger, a boy really, whose father is a stableman at another of the Bellevue cottages, and who is learning the work. Both of them wear cotton shirts under leather aprons, and they wear soft caps rather than the heavier hats you might expect, because the tunnel is warm and a heavy hat makes a man sweat. They do not talk very much. There's not much to say. They know the rhythm. John steers the front handle and takes the load through the mouth into the yard. The boy steadies the back. They stop the cart under the chute. A great slap of coal comes down in a controlled shot out of the hopper high up on the loading platform, guided by a small iron gate the yardman works. Several £100 of it slides in a shining black wedge into the box. Some dust rises. John steps back so as not to breathe it. The gate closes. The load is on. Then they turn the cart and the wheels make a small rolling squeak on the iron rails, and they begin the walk back. It is a walk without hurry. Down the length of the tunnel, past the string of small lit bulbs, past the banked black walls of the earlier deliveries, into the deeper warmth, and at last through the far arch into the coal vault under the house. The vault is a room of its own, low and cold at first, because it opens right off the tunnel, but with an iron door at its inner end that leads through into the boiler room proper, where the 2 great furnaces stand and where the boilerman waits. John does not open that door. His work ends here. He tips the cart's load into the bin the boilerman will draw from, using an iron scoop hung on the wall for the purpose. He counts the load off in his head. The tunnel crew's whole shift is measured not in hours but in loads. 12 loads is a normal winter night with the family away. 20 loads is a cold snap. 30 loads was a memorable January 2 years ago, when the whole coast froze and every cottage on Bellevue Avenue burned twice its usual coal. John remembers that January well. They turn the cart again. They begin the walk back down the tunnel toward the yard. The tunnel is warm around them, and the light is steady, and the small rolling squeak of the wheels on the iron rails is one of the working sounds of the whole night. They pass through the mouth into the yard. The winter air hits their faces. They set the cart under the chute again. The yardman opens the gate. Another wedge of coal slides in. Somewhere below us, though we cannot see it from here, a furnace door swings open, and the light lays a great oblong across the brick. The boilerman is beginning his own night. The tunnel men are only halfway through theirs. And where does this lawn come from, and the pavilion that stands so quietly above us? That is the next room we will step into, and the next chapter is a walk around the house that hides its own labour. Come up out of the tunnel with me a moment. Not up into the coal vault at the far end where the boilerman waits, but back out through the mouth into the yard and along the hedge and around to the front of the house. It is a walk of about 100 yards on a gravel path that curves to bring you out onto the drive. It is cold outside, and the wind is up a little. Turn your collar. And now, from the drive, look at the pavilion that stands in the garden. You would not, on a first sight, take it for a great house at all. You might take it for a small country chateau lifted intact from a small park outside Paris, and that is exactly what it is meant to be. Its architect, a shy, self-taught draftsman from Philadelphia named Horace Trumbauer, then not yet 30 years old, took as his model a real French house, the Château d'Asnières, built in 1750 on the outskirts of Paris. Trumbauer had made a careful study of it. He knew its proportions. He knew its roof lines. And on 12 acres of Newport lawn, between Bellevue Avenue and Dixon Street, he set his American copy of it, faced entirely in Indiana limestone, symmetrical, restrained and correct. It rises 2 full stories to the cornice. Above the cornice runs a stone balustrade, plain and low, and there, on the drive, in the winter dark, the balustrade is where your eye stops. You will not from the drive see a 3rd floor. You will not see a servant's dormer or a chimney line or a laundry vent. The balustrade hides them. Because behind that stone rail, tucked into the roof line and lit by dormer windows that face inward onto a hidden central well, is the entire servants' floor of the house. There is a 3rd half story above your head that you cannot see. 2 full stories to the cornice, a 3rd half story hidden behind the stone balustrade. That is the whole of the house from the drive. This is not an accident. This is Trumbauer's whole plan. This is Berwind's whole taste. The house is not meant to look like a working establishment. The house is meant to look like a jewel. The people who make it work are not meant to be inside your eye when you look at it. So the servants live above the cornice, behind the rail, in dormered rooms that face inward and give nothing away. And they come and go by a service door on the far side of the north wing, behind a screen of shrubbery, invisible from the drive. Come inside with me a moment. The vestibule. Pale breccia violette marble on the walls, and a black and white marble floor set in a great square pattern. It is a cold room without the family in it, but not truly cold because the risers behind the panels are gently steamed. Beyond the vestibule, the ballroom, 40 feet by 50, 2 stories tall, the 2 great Venetian paintings by Francesco Guardi of the Doge's state processions, hanging one on each long wall, dated by the Preservation Society to about 1766. Beyond the ballroom, the walnut dining room, panelled in an 18th century French chateau's own boiserie brought over piece by piece. Beyond that, the Louis XV salon in gold, and the Louis XVI salon in pale blue. Turn a corner. A small drawing room lined in 18th century Chinese lacquer panels, called the Chinese breakfast room. On the north side of the house, a conservatory glazed in curved glass. Palms and ferns kept alive, in this New England winter, by the same heat that is warming the marble halls around us. You will notice something as we walk. There is no visible fixture doing the warming. There is no register in the wall. There is no radiator in the corner. The heat is coming from behind the panelling, out through carved wooden grills that look like part of the woodwork, and it is coming from radiators set behind those grills, which are fed by steam that is climbing invisibly up cast iron risers in wool chases from the boiler room below. The whole engineering of the heat is hidden behind the wood the way the servants are hidden behind the balustrade. You will also notice, if you know where to look, the doors that are not doors. 2 are near the ballroom's short walls. 1 is at the end of the walnut dining room. They are jib doors cut into the panelling flush with the wood, papered or painted on the corridor side to match the wall around them. When one is closed, you cannot see it. When one is open, a footman appears out of a wall. He crosses on the muffled runner behind the door, along the servants' corridor, and vanishes back into a wall on the far side. This is how the food comes to the table. This is how the fires are seen to. This is how the ashes go out. You see, at the family's evening, only the footman standing behind the chair. You do not see the muffled runner in the wall, and under the whole plan of the house, under the marble and the walnut and the Guardi paintings and the palm room, is the coal tunnel we have just walked. It is the most graceful expression of the whole aesthetic. It is the last mile of a great chain of concealment. Coal comes down that tunnel, ash goes out along the same rails, and neither is ever visible from the drive. Trumbauer went on, after this house, to build a great Whitemarsh Hall for the Stotesburys. He went on, at the end of his career, to draw the plans for the main library of Harvard University for the Wideners. He was quiet, correct, and much more famous by the end than at the beginning. But at the Elms in 1901 he was still a young man, and this small French pavilion on Bellevue Avenue was the house that made his name in the American resort world. We can stand a moment on the drive in the dark with the little pavilion in front of us. 2 stories to the cornice, the balustrade above them, hiding the maids' rooms and the coal chimneys, a single caretaker's light burning steadily in a lower window, and under the perfect lawn, warm and quiet and lit with small incandescent bulbs, the tunnel where the coal is going in, and the coal that is coming up that tunnel tonight, that steady heap of soft bituminous with its clean sweet smell, comes from a very particular place. It comes, in fact, from the master's own ground. The master of the house is a man named Edward Julius Berwind. He is not in Newport tonight. He is at his winter address in New York, a townhouse on the corner of 64th Street and 5th Avenue, and he will not come up to the Elms for months. But if we are to understand the coal in the tunnel, we have to sit a while with him, gently, because the coal in the tunnel and the man in New York are the same story. He was born in Philadelphia in 1848, the son of German immigrant parents who had come across in the ordinary way of that great emigration, without wealth, without connection, with a small trade and a large hope. Edward was one of several brothers. He was small, spare, and correct as a boy. He had a scholar's eye and a Navy man's discipline. He was accepted into the United States Naval Academy at Annapolis, and he graduated with the class of 1869. He served in the Navy for 6 years, aboard ship, in the ordinary duties of a peacetime officer, and then, in 1875, he resigned his commission and went home to Philadelphia to join his brothers in the coal business. The business was small at that time. It had a yard in Philadelphia and a name that would become well known, the Berwind White Coal Mining Company of Philadelphia and New York. Its trade was bituminous coal, the soft, hot, burning coal of the Pennsylvania seams, particularly the seams around Windburn in Cambria County. Edward, the returned Navy officer, brought the disciplines of Annapolis to the ordering of the yards, the ledgers, the contracts. He also brought a certain patience. He did not chase every contract. He watched the ones he wanted. Within a few years, he was the sole managing partner of the firm. By 1890, Berwind White was one of the great American coal houses. It held the coal contract for the United States Navy. The coal it had once been Edward's own work to burn under the boilers of a peacetime cruiser. It held the coal contract for the Pennsylvania Railroad and for the transatlantic lines that ran out of New York. Later it would hold the coal contract for the New York City subway system. It ran its own trains. It owned its own mines. It fed its own coal into its own hopper cars and sent them, thousands of times a year, to yards up and down the eastern seaboard. Edward was known, in his own time, as one of the 59 men who ruled America. He did not particularly care for the phrase. He came to his office on Broad Street in New York at exactly 9 each morning. He wore, in the fashion of his generation, white side whiskers and a plain sober suit. He read the Times and the Herald with his coffee. He knew personally every major buyer of coal in the country. He was reserved, private, and famously precise. It is documented in his obituary in the New York Times of 1936 that he said, of his own business, "I never sold coal I did not first look at." He meant it plainly. He walked the yards. He knew what he sold. When Berwind and his wife Hermione set about building their Newport house in 1899, the coal was already there. It was in his hopper cars. It was on his trains. The line that ran up the coast to Providence and turned east to Newport was already his customer, in the sense that its locomotives burned Berwind White coal. It cost him almost nothing, in the marginal accounting of a great coal house, to arrange for a spur of that line to be run onto his own estate. It cost him almost nothing, at the ordinary trade rate of about $3.50 a ton for delivered bituminous at Newport in the first years of the 20th century to keep his own house warm on his own coal, $3.50 a ton at his own rate on his own line in his own cars. The winter fuel bill for the closed house at the Elms in a Newport winter was somewhere near $1,000 a season. To a man whose personal income was already several millions a year, that figure was not a bill. It was a courtesy of scale. But you should not think on those numbers that the coal in the tunnel was a small thing to him. It was, in a way that is hard to explain unless you have known men of his generation, a quiet daily satisfaction. On the mornings he was in residence at the Elms, Edward Berwind would come down, in his shirt sleeves and his soft cap, and walk to the boiler room. He would open the door, he would look at the fires, he would open one of the small mica windows on a furnace door and watch the coal draw. He would speak briefly to the boilerman, whom he knew by name, and then he would walk out along the tunnel to the coal vault, take up a handful of the coal in the bin, and roll it in his palm to feel its weight and its dust, the way a fisherman weighs a good catch. It was his product, it was his ground, it was his fire. There is a small paradox in this, and it is worth sitting with. Berwind's fortune was made from the coal that also, in that same generation, sooted the American cities and thickened the New York winter, and gave the miners of Windber and Cambria County both their livelihood and their long lung trouble. Both of those things are true. The men in the mines were paid, and their pay fed households, and the same coal made the great steel age of America possible. The men in the mines were also worked hard, and their strikes are part of the American record, and Berwind on the operator side held a hard line in those years. The narration can honour the house without denying the industry, and can honour the industry without pretending it was clean. Both things are true. Both things are true at once. The coal in the tunnel is warm and safe and welcome, and the ground it came out of is a harder story, and the two live in one house on Bellevue Avenue on a winter night in the first years of the 20th century. Enough of that, for now. Berwind is not in the house tonight. He is at 64th and 5th Avenue in New York, in a house you will not see in this story, and the letters that will bring him up to Newport at Easter have not yet been written. The coal is on the trip he sent it on. The boiler man is at his furnaces waiting for it. And if the coal is the fuel that keeps the house alive, the light is what makes it habitable, and the Elms had a marvel of a light of its own, wired from the day it opened. The Elms opened its doors to its family in the summer of 1901. That first evening, and every evening since, the light in every one of its rooms has been electric. There is no gas main into the property. There is no gas fixture in a single room of the house, upstairs or down, family or servant. From the day the first drapes were hung, and the first fires were lit, and the first table was laid, the Berwinds' cottage was one of the earliest fully electric houses in the American resort world. It is one of the small marvels of the house, and it is a marvel most tourists on the summer tour today walk past without noticing, because to a modern eye a lit lamp is a lit lamp. The house has its own transformer vault tucked into the north wing basement, near the coal vault, and its own alternating current distribution running out through the walls in shielded conduits to every fixture. It is fed off the town supply through a private connection, and it has, in that vault, the ability to run on a private generator if the town supply fails. The town supply, in Newport in the first years of the 20th century, does fail from time to time, in a hard nor'easter or when a wire breaks over the harbour. The generator has never yet had to hold the house up for more than a few hours together, but it is there. Come inside with me and walk the rooms, because the light itself is worth a slow chapter, and the caretaker is doing exactly this walk right now. The caretaker's name is a matter of record only in the household accounts, and the accounts spell his name a little differently in different ledgers. Let us call him Mr. Doyle. He is the resident caretaker of the Elms for the winters. He is in his 50s, a Newport man, a widower with a grown daughter married to a Providence bookkeeper. His rooms are on the ground floor of the north wing near the housekeeper's office, and he has been in this post since the house opened. He knows every fixture in it. At this hour, a little after 5, with the tunnel men beginning their shift, he is doing his early evening walk. He carries no lamp of his own. He does not need to. He walks the ground floor with a small brass switch key on a leather thong at his hip, and at each principal doorway he reaches up and turns a switch, and a set of concealed lights comes on high in the cornice, thrown down into the room as a soft, steady wash. There is no sputter. There is no rise, as with a gas mantle. The room simply is lit, all at once, evenly, warm as a candle. The fixtures themselves are hidden. Trumbauer's plans and Berwind's taste were of one mind on this. You will not see, in the ballroom, a chandelier alone. There is a crystal chandelier, of course, hung from the ceiling on a great gilt rope, but the wash of light that fills the room comes from behind a moulded plaster cornice, from a run of small lamps concealed there. In the dining room, the chandelier is a baccarat piece over the table, and around it, again, a hidden cornice light. In the Louis salons the same, in the vestibule the same, and in the corridors running the length of the house, small ceiling fixtures set into medallions, plain and correct, giving a light that never demands the eye. Mr. Doyle does not turn on many of these tonight. The family are away. Most of the staterooms will not be lit at all. He turns on only the vestibule briefly for his own passage, and the corridor light he needs to reach the next door. Then he turns them off behind him. The rest of the house he walks in the dim, reflected glow that comes from the tunnel and the boiler room downstairs, and from a single steady light in the servants' hall. Go upstairs with him for a moment. On the family floor above the staterooms the fixtures are less formal. Wall sconces in each bedroom with silk shades, a reading lamp on each writing desk, a dressing table with 2 small lamps flanking the mirror in the mistress's room, all of them plain electric, all wired to switches by the bed and by the door. On the servants' floor above that, the fixtures are the plainest of all. A single ceiling bulb in each small bedroom, a plain porcelain socket, no shade. It is a fixture you can find in a modest house of the same year. And that plainness on the servants' floor is not a slight. It is what the electricity trade calls the ordinary domestic fitting of the time, and it is what any small comfortable house would have installed. It is only the concealed cornices below that are extraordinary. There are, by a rough count in the fixture inventories of the house, some 6,000 light fixtures in the house, across all its floors, from the cornice lamps to the bathroom pulls to the switch by the fireplace in the smoking room. 6,000 fixtures for one family. Not one of them a gas jet. Not one of them a candle in ordinary use, though a candelabrum sits on every mantel for ceremony. 6,000 small steady bulbs that do not sputter and do not smell, and do not need a running footman to light them. 6,000 quiet lights, most of them off tonight, waiting for the summer. There is a small comparison to make, and the narration will only make it once in wonder. Just outside the estate wall, in the older Newport houses along the further stretches of Bellevue, and along Ochre Point, the light this winter is still, in many rooms, a hissing gas mantle over a mahogany table. The eye of the town is a mixed eye. Gas is old comfort. Electricity is new. The Berwinds, by choosing all electricity from the day the house opened, put themselves at the very forward edge of the resort. In another 20 years the electric light would be the ordinary light of the American home, and the gas mantle would be a curiosity. In the winter of 1901, along the older streets of Newport, it was still a nightly small suspense whether a mantle would light, or hiss, or begin to fume, and a housemaid stood by to trim it. In the Elms, Mr. Doyle turned a switch and the room was lit and there was nothing else to do. Come back down with him now, the vestibule, the switch under his hand, the wash of light off the black and white marble floor, then off again, dark again, only the smallest glow from the corridor beyond. He passes on. He's going to the servants' hall where his own supper is waiting. And somewhere below us, a furnace door swings open, and the light lays a great oblong across the brick. We're going down the service stair now to where the household is sitting down to its own supper. Come down the service stair with him. The stair is plain, of varnished pine, without a runner. It winds down 2 turns from the ground floor into the basement, and it lets you out into a corridor of whitewashed plaster and painted brick, with a low ceiling and a floor of small square tiles. This corridor runs the length of the north wing and connects the pantries, the china room, the silver room, the wine cellar, the laundry, the housekeeper's office, and, at its far end, the servants' hall. The servants' hall itself is a plain, warm room. Whitewashed walls, a stone floor scrubbed to a pale grey, a pine ceiling low enough that a tall footman must remember his hat when he enters. The room is dominated by one long scrubbed pine table, seated for 20 or more, and lit tonight by a single small ceiling bulb over the middle of it, and by 2 smaller wall lamps at either end. In the corner, a small pot-bellied stove kept lit through the winter, more for cheer than for heat, because the room already borrows warmth from the boiler room 3 doors along. On the wall behind the head of the table hangs the annunciator board, and it is worth a good long look before we sit down. The board is a rectangle of dark polished walnut, about 3 feet wide by 2 feet tall, hung on the wall at head height. Set into it, in 3 neat rows, are the small numbered brass bells, one for every principal room in the house. There is a bell for the ballroom, a bell for the walnut dining room, a bell for the Louis XV salon, a bell for the master's bedroom, a bell for the mistress's bedroom, a bell for each of the 5 principal guest rooms, a bell for Miss Julia's sitting room over the porte-cochere, and so on down through the smaller rooms. Under each bell a small painted number, and below the numbers a small painted card giving the room's name, in the neat hand of the housekeeper who set it up when the house opened. The wire from each bell runs up through the wall, chases into the plaster of the ceiling above, 40 to 70 feet on average, and out at last into a small ivory pull hanging by a silk cord next to the bed, or the desk, or the writing chair in that room. When someone in the house pulls the cord, the wire settles, the bell trembles, and a quarter-second later gives one small clear ring in the servants' hall. The head footman or the hall boy on duty looks up at the board and sees which bell has rung, because each bell continues to tremble faintly for a few seconds after its sound has faded, a small visible clue for a busy hall. Tonight not one bell on the board is ringing, not one. The whole board is silent, and yet the footman on duty, a young man in his 20s, sits at his stool at the corner where he can see the board, and he watches it. That is his post. He watches it whether it rings or not. That is what a good hall boy does. The table is set for 8 tonight. On summer nights at high season, it is set for 20 or 30. In winter, with the family away and the household reduced to its skeleton, the table is set for 8, and there is a comfortable warmth about a small table in a large hall, like a family gathered in the kitchen of a farmhouse when the parlour is closed. At the head of the table sits the head butler, a man whose name is well known in the Preservation Society's tour, and whose long service in the Berwind house makes him one of the true characters of the story. His name is Ernest Birch. He is a butler of the old school, tall, spare, correct, in a plain black jacket and stiff collar. He is in his 40s or 50s in this decade, and he will grow old at the Elms. He is spoken of later in his life by Julia Berwind, who called him her admiral, on the private joke that Birch ran the house as her brother once ran the navy. The quote is preserved in the Preservation Society's biographical file on the family, and it is a warm phrase, and we can keep it in mind because it tells you what the household thought of him. Beside him sits the housekeeper. Let us say her name was Margaret. She is a woman of steady middle age, in a plain dark dress and a white apron, and she has been in the Berwind service for 12 years. She keeps the household inventories and the linens and the whole record of what the maids do. Down the table from them, a lady's maid who has stayed on for the winter to look after the mistress's clothes, a second footman, a hall boy, 2 housemaids who have stayed to help with the winter cleaning of the state rooms, and one of the men from the tunnel who has come up early because he is not going down for another hour. 8, all told. The meal is plain and abundant. Bread from the house bakery under the north wing, baked that morning by a girl the housekeeper trained for the task. A soup of leftover vegetables and a knuckle of mutton in a great tureen at the middle of the table. A joint of cold roast beef from the day before, sliced on a wooden board. Potatoes, mashed with butter. A dish of pickled onions, ale for the men, small beer for the women, tea to follow. It is the ordinary supper of an English great house of the same generation, transposed to a Newport basement. Nobody talks a great deal. The eating is unhurried. Birch says a short grace at the beginning in his English voice, and nothing more until the tea. There is a small comfort in this scene, and it will hold through the rest of the night. The people at this table are the people who will keep the house through the dark hours and they are eating in company in a warm room with a cheerful stove in the corner and a silent bellboard on the wall. They are neither below nor above in this room. They are around one table. The house exists for them at this hour exactly as much as it exists for the family who are not here. The warmth is coming up through the floor, quiet and steady, and you can feel it if you listen for it. When they finish, Birch will stand, in his correct English way, and give one small nod, and the men will stand and the women will follow. The plates will be cleared into the scullery by the hall boy. The tea things will be set. Some of them will go on to their evening duties, and some will settle to a small hour of leisure in a smaller sitting room off the servants' hall, where the upper servants keep a low fire. But before we leave this room, while a footman is beginning a quieter round upstairs, there is one small kindness to notice. Birch, on standing, always sets his napkin down neatly and gives a small nod to the hall boy in the corner. The hall boy nods back. That small acknowledgement, between the highest and the lowest man at the table, is a thing that happened every night, and is preserved in the small memories of the house, and it is a thing of the register we are keeping tonight, and it is worth carrying up the service stair with us. And while the household sits, upstairs a footman is beginning a quieter round. His job is to make sure the family rooms are truly closed for the night, and it is a beautiful small ritual. Come up the service stair with the second footman. His name, in this decade, is not preserved in the household record with certainty. Let us follow the caretaker's round he is walking, and let us call him Thomas. He is a young man in his early 20s, English-trained, come out to Newport with Ernest Birch a few years ago. He's in his black jacket and soft slippers. He carries a small brass hand lamp with a green glass shade, thrown down at his feet, so his light does not travel out into a corridor and disturb a shutter he cannot see. He has a small taper in his pocket and a folded cloth for wiping a fixture that has caught a fingerprint. He looks like a man on a very quiet errand, because he is. He goes up the service stair to the family floor. He steps out into a corridor of pale carpet and painted panels, and he walks it in his slippers so softly that even the corridor's own long case clock does not seem to notice him. He is walking to the mistress's bedroom first, because that has always been the order of this round, and Birch will not have him alter it. The mistress's bedroom is on the west side of the house, over the drawing room, facing the sea. It is a room in painted French panels, delicate and pale, of the kind of blue that is nearly grey until a lamp comes on. The bed is a large half-tester, with an embroidered silk hanging behind it. The dressing table stands in the west window, angled so that the mistress could sit at it in the morning and look out at the water past the tall trees of the garden. 2 small lamps flank the mirror. A hairbrush lies on the table, silver-backed, monogrammed. It has not been moved for weeks. It has not been moved because the mistress is not here. Above the mantel hangs a portrait. It is a full-length portrait of Sarah Hermione Torrey Berwind, whom the household knew as Hermione. She's standing in a shimmering white evening gown in 3/4 turn, her right hand resting on the back of a chair, her left hanging softly at her side. The painter is Giovanni Boldini, the Italian society painter who painted so many of the great American ladies of the age, and his brush is unmistakable. The gown seems to be still moving. The signature is small in the lower right, and the date is 1905. It is the portrait the family loved best of her. Thomas stands a moment in the doorway. He looks at the portrait without stopping, in the way a household member glances at a thing they see every day. Then he walks the room. He steps around the bed and to the west window and lifts the corner of the drape and looks at the great shutter behind the drape. The shutter is secure. The catch is set. He drops the drape. He crosses to the second window and does the same. He crosses to the third. He crosses to the door of the small octagonal sitting room that lies between the mistress's bedroom and the master's, and he glances through it. That door was closed and remains closed. He returns. Now, if we are being honest about the register of this small room, we should sit with a thing we have to be careful about. Hermione Berwind died in 1922 at the age of 59. On the winter night in 1901 that we are inside now, she is alive. She's in the New York house on 64th Street. She is well. She's not gone. But the house that we walk in the winter has, in it, at any moment, the memory of the woman who painted it, and Hermione painted the elms as much as Trumbauer built it. Every panel in this room was chosen by her. Every shade of blue in the silks was chosen by her. The dressing table stands where it stands because she wanted the morning light. So on a winter night in her absence, this room is not merely empty. It is a room that carries her. Thomas does not think of her as absent so much as away. She will be back at Easter, and the dressing table will be moved a quarter-inch to catch the summer light, and the hairbrush will be picked up, and the room will breathe again. In the meantime, the room is held. The shutters are secure. The panels are cool to the touch, but not cold. The steam is coming up quietly behind the wainscot, keeping the wall from taking a chill. Thomas finishes his round of the mistress's room. He steps out into the corridor. He does not close the door hard. He pulls it to softly and turns the handle down slowly so that not even the catch clicks. This is one of the small graces of a good footman. He's used to a house full of sleeping guests, and even when there are none, he behaves as though there are. He crosses to the master's bedroom on the south side of the house. Same round. Walnut panelling. A larger, plainer bed. The master's writing desk in the corner, papers stacked neatly. A photograph on the desk of Hermione at 64th Street taken in the summer garden. Shutters secure. Handle down slowly. Door pulled to. He crosses to the small octagonal sitting room between them, and he stands a moment in it. It is a very small room, no more than 8 feet across, with 8 painted walls and a small marble mantel and a single delicate French chair. It is the room the master and mistress used on quiet evenings to read to each other. The chair is empty, the lamp is off. Thomas does not need to check the shutter here because the little sitting room has no window of its own. He looks at the chair a moment, then turns and leaves. He walks down the corridor to the guest rooms. 5 principal guest rooms, each with its own fireplace and its own bathroom, a rarity of the age. In each, the same round. Shutters. Fires laid for the morning even though no one will use them tonight. Nothing amiss. In each he stands in the doorway a moment, then walks on. At the end of the corridor, over the porte-cochere, is Miss Julia Berwind's suite. Miss Julia is the master's younger unmarried sister, and she lives with the family for much of the year, though tonight she's with Edward and Hermione in New York. Her suite is a smaller version of the mistress's suite. A bedroom in her preferred pale green, a sitting room with a writing desk covered in her books, and a small dressing room. Thomas walks it in the same slow round. Shutters, doors. He does not linger. Then he returns to the head of the service stair and he pauses. He looks along the corridor once, the whole length of the family floor lying quiet in the pale reflected light from the vestibule below. He turns down the small brass hand lamp so that only the merest glow remains, so that his walk down the service stair will not throw a light out into the corridor behind him. He goes down, and downstairs the state-rooms are being walked in the same slow shadow, and the light in them is not on. That is the next room, or the 12 of them, in a slow evening tour. The state-rooms of the Elms are on the ground floor, arranged around the vestibule in a plan that a French draftsman of the 18th century would recognise at once. 12 principal rooms in a great enfilade, opening one to the next through tall doors. 60 rooms in the house in total, upstairs and down and in the servants' floor, of which perhaps a dozen are principal. On this winter night, in the absence of the family, only one of them is lit at a time, and only for a minute. The footman who walks them is another of the caretaker's small circle, and let us stay with Thomas, because Birch has kept the round paired to one man at a time for the winter. He comes down the service stair to the vestibule, and he pauses there, in the pale wash from the corridor beyond, and lets his eyes adjust to the near dark. The vestibule. It is the largest room in the pavilion after the ballroom. Pale breccia violette marble on the walls, from floor to a high moulded cornice. Slabs of black and white marble on the floor laid in the great square pattern, each square about 3 feet on a side, mitered and polished. In the middle of the floor stands a low round table with a great silver salver on it for calling cards. The salver is empty tonight. Around the walls, plain benches upholstered in dark red velvet. 2 great fireplaces face each other across the room, cold tonight. Above one of them, the marble mantel is French of the 18th century, and above the other an exact match, made in Newport by a stone yard that copied it slab for slab. You cannot tell which is which. Thomas turns on his little brass hand lamp a bare degree, so it throws only a small patch of light at his feet, and he walks the room. He does not turn on the ceiling lamps. He does not need to. He knows the room by feel. He crosses to the ballroom door. The ballroom, 40 feet by 50, 2 stories tall. The great crystal chandelier hangs from a bronze rosette in the ceiling on a gilt chain. It is not lit. On each long wall hangs one of the 2 enormous Venetian paintings by Francesco Guardi of the Doge's state processions. Both paintings are dated by the Preservation Society to about 1766, and they are among the great early Guardis in an American house. In the near dark they are dark. You can see, if you know where to look, the faint gleam of the water in the painting's backgrounds, and the pale slash of the state gondola's roof, but no more. Thomas walks the ballroom slowly, along one long wall, across the far short wall, back along the other long wall, and back to the door. He is not looking at the paintings whom he sees every day. He is looking at the shutters behind the drapes, at the windows on the west side that face the garden, at the corner where a small water stain would come first if there was a leak, at the great parquet floor for a splinter risen where the wood met the weather. He is looking for the small things a caretaker looks for. Nothing is amiss. He walks on, through the ballroom's far door into the walnut dining room. The dining room is panelled in an 18th century French chateau's own boiserie, taken out of that chateau, brought over, and installed here piece by piece, with the panels renumbered in pencil on the back so they could be set in the right order. The panels are of walnut, oiled to a dark, warm brown, and the baccarat chandelier over the table is unlit, and the chairs are pushed in around the long polished table, and the room smells faintly always of the beeswax the housemaids use to keep the panels quiet. Thomas walks it. Shutters. The pantry door at the far end of the room is closed. He walks on, through the dining room's other door into the Louis XV salon. Gold everywhere, in the woodwork, in the frames of the 4 small paintings on the walls, in the silk on the walls between the frames. A pale gold, not shining. A silk that in the summer takes the afternoon sun and glows. In the winter dark it is muted, almost brown. The room has a small marble mantel, French, delicate, with a French clock on it, still ticking, still wound by the footman on Monday morning. Thomas listens for the ticker moment. It is there. He walks on. Through the salon into the Louis XVI salon. Pale blue silk on the walls, and small gilt chairs, and a marble mantel with a candelabrum on it, and a French sofa arranged along the far wall. This is Hermione's favourite room. The blue is her blue. Thomas walks it more carefully than most, as if not to disturb her taste. Shutters. The door to the small library is closed. He walks on. Through the salon into the Chinese breakfast room. This is a small room. It is lined in 18th century Chinese lacquer panels, black and gold, brought back from a European sale of a French collection. On them, in fine gold, are birds and flowers, and small pavilions and figures in old dress, all against a deep black. The panels are hung as walls, floor to ceiling, and the room is furnished with a round table and 8 chairs. It is where the family took the smaller meals, breakfast and light lunches, and the little suppers of a summer evening when the ballroom's dinner would be too much. Thomas walks it. Shutters. The panels are cool to the touch but not cold. The steam has been up to them all evening. He walks on. Along a small passage into the north conservatory. This is one of the wonders of the house that the summer tour does not always let you into. It is a small room glazed in curved glass panes, a half-circle in plan, warmed by the same central steam that warms the marble halls, and in it stand palms and tree ferns and a small collection of orchids and other things that would not survive a Newport winter left alone. Thomas walks in among them. He touches the leaf of a fern to see it is not brittle. The plants are being watered by a maid who comes in 3 times a week for the purpose. The heat is holding them. He walks out. He continues along the north side of the house, through the small library, through the family sitting room, through the smoking room panelled in dark oak. At each threshold the same round. Shutters, doors. Not a fire tonight in any grate. The house is being held on the central steam alone. Only in the smoking room is there a small heap of laid coals in the grate, ready to be lit if the master were to come up unexpectedly, and Thomas checks that the paper and kindling are dry. He completes his round back at the vestibule. He crosses the black and white marble floor to the head of the service stair. He turns his little brass hand lamp lower. He goes down. The staterooms are closed for the night. Not one of them has been lit at more than a whisper. The panels are all cool to the touch and not cold. The paintings hang in their proper dark. The chandeliers are still. The clocks tick. And beneath us the pantries and the china room and the silver room are being walked in the same slow way. Those are our next rooms and the small careful hands that keep them. The corridor of the basement along the north side of the house is a plain and useful street. Whitewashed plaster on the walls, painted the same soft cream every 3 years, painted brick where the walls turn a corner, a floor of small square tiles laid on the diagonal, easy to sweep and to wet mop. A ceiling of pine boards with the joists showing, painted the same cream as the walls. It is the working street of the house, and along it lie the small kingdoms that keep the household in cups and plates and glasses and forks and spoons and bottles and knives and jugs and salt and pepper. Come down the corridor with the housekeeper. Her name, in our story, is Margaret. She's just risen from the servants' hall table, where she took a small second cup of tea to help her think through the week's linen order. She wears, as always, a plain dark dress of good stuff, a white apron with a small pocket, and at her belt a bunch of keys on a steel ring. She's a woman of steady middle age. She has the housekeeper's air of a person who is never surprised. She has seen every kind of small emergency, and none of them shake her. Her first stop is the china room. She unlocks it with one of her keys. The door swings in on well-oiled hinges, and behind it lies a room the size of a comfortable parlour, lined on every wall, floor to ceiling, with shelves. On the shelves stand the china sets of the house. Not one set, but many. A great dinner service of Sèvres in white and gold, for the ballroom dinners of 20 and 30 and 40. A second service, of Minton, in pale blue and gold, for the family's own everyday. A dessert service of Worcester, in a rose pattern, for the light suppers in the Chinese breakfast room. A tea service of Meissen, older than the house, brought over from an English collection. Coffee cups of a dozen kinds, small covered cocotte dishes for eggs, broth cups, cream jugs, sugar bowls, slop basins. Each piece stands in its own place. On some shelves the pieces stand in a shallow felted cradle. A little raised rim of green felt around the base of the shelf, so that a piece cannot slide against its neighbour and chip an edge. The felt is dark green, and it is cut to shape. Every year the housekeeper takes the pieces out, cleans the shelves, brushes the felt, and puts them back. It is a 2-day job in the spring, and Margaret does it herself. She goes down the aisle of shelves slowly, looking. She's not looking to count. She counts on the 1st of every month. She's looking to see that no piece has slid, that no maid has put back a plate in the wrong place, that no shelf has begun to sag. She stops at the Sèvres dinner service, and she takes down a plate at random, and she looks at its underside for the small blue crossed swords of the mark. She replaces it. She goes on. The china is put away in this room, not by weight, but by feel. That is Margaret's own rule. A maid, sent to fetch a mason cup for a mistress's tray, does not weigh the cup in her hand. She feels for it. She reaches into the shadow of the shelf without turning on the strong overhead light, and her fingers find the cup by its known place. She lifts it out, cradled, without her thumb near the rim. She sets it in a warmed cloth on her tray. She does not, ever, hear the small click of china against china. That is how the Berwind china stays whole for decades. Out of the china room, down the corridor, to the silver room. Another key, another door. This room is smaller and lined not with open shelves, but with a great cabinet of drawers, from floor to ceiling, each drawer lined in green baize, each drawer keyed to a particular kind of piece. The knives in one drawer, the forks in another, the fish knives in a third, the service spoons in one, the dessert spoons in another. The great pieces, the meat platters and the vegetable dishes and the sauce boats and the epingers and the candelabra, stand on shelves above the drawers, each wrapped in flannel. In one corner stands the safe, a good iron box, into which the loose pieces of great value are put at night. Miss Julia's own small tea set of very fine old English silver is in the safe now. On the table in the middle of the silver room, under a good lamp, lies the polishing cloth and the small tins of polish. A man comes in every morning to work at the silver, at a chair, at this table. He is the silver man, a specialist post in a house of this class. He has polished this silver for years. He has learned the fingerprints of every family member and every long-time guest. He has been known to say, of a piece that has come back from the table, that Miss Julia held it, because Miss Julia's small thumbprint is always in the same place. But the silver man is off tonight. His work is done. Out of the silver room, along the corridor, past the wine-cellar door which Margaret only unlocks when Birch asks her, past the linen store where the sheets are folded on cedar shelves, past the housekeeper's own small office with its roll-top desk. Here Margaret pauses. The office is her citadel. On the desk lie her ledgers, the great household inventory in leather in her own steady hand, in which every piece of china and glass and silver and linen in the house is entered by number and set and description, with a note of when it came in and any breakage, a separate inventory of the guest rooms, listing what stands on which mantel, a book of the wages, a book of the market accounts, a calendar of the year's events, everything the household does, in ink, in her hand. Above the desk on the wall hangs a small framed list of the clocks, over 30 clocks in this house, in the halls and in the salons and in the bedrooms and in the servants' hall itself and in the kitchen, and each one is wound weekly. It is the small honoured duty of a footman to wind them, and it is done on Monday mornings, and it takes about 2 hours together, because the winder is a slow, careful walker, and because each clock has its own particular way of being touched. Margaret keeps a mark against each clock as it is wound, so that no clock is ever missed for a week and left to stop. It's a small thing, and it is one of the things that makes the difference between a house that is kept and a house that is only occupied. She locks the office. She turns and starts back down the corridor toward the servants' hall for a moment, before she goes on to the coal vault to speak to the boiler man about the week's coal. She walks past the china room and the silver room and the linen store, and she is a woman going about her long, slow evening's work in a house whose small, quiet order she keeps entirely in her own head. And now we can go through the small door and down the last flight of the service stair into the room that all of this rests upon. The boiler room and its 2 great coal furnaces are waiting for us. At the far end of the basement corridor, past the coal vault where John and the boy have just tipped in another load, is a small iron door. It is painted the same cream as the walls, so as not to catch the eye. Behind the door is a short flight of 3 or 4 steps down, cut into the stone, and at the bottom of those steps is the boiler room proper. Come down them slowly because the step is steeper than you expect, and hold the wall. The boiler room is a low, whitewashed vault, about 20 feet by 30, tucked under the north wing of the house. Its ceiling is low. Its floor is the same small square tile as the corridor, but here it is scrubbed so often that it is a paler grey than anywhere else in the basement. The walls are whitewashed brick, whitewashed again every spring, and they are so clean that in the light of a bare bulb they almost glow. The reason the room is so clean is that Edward Berwind, on the mornings he was in residence, walked down these steps in his shirt sleeves and inspected the boiler room himself, and no boilerman ever wanted the master's white hand to come away with a smudge on it. So the boiler room has always been kept as a good ship's engine room is kept, scrubbed, tidy, and proud. Along the far wall stand the two great coal furnaces side by side. Two great coal furnaces, not one, because the house is too big for one to hold on its own, and because a house of this class must never be caught with a single boiler down. Each furnace is a great iron box, about 6 feet by 4 in its outside dimensions, standing on a stone platform an inch or two above the tile floor. Each has an iron door on its front face, hinged at the side, about 2 feet by 3, with a small mica window in the middle, through which the fire inside can be watched without opening the door. Each has, above it, a great pipe of black iron that rises through the ceiling and away into the chimney flue. Each has, on its side, a pressure gauge with a needle and a water glass, a small vertical tube of glass with a black line up its middle showing the water level in the boiler above. Between the furnaces in the corner is a small pine table scrubbed. On the table stands a tin mug, a small enamel plate, a folded cloth. Beside the table is a wooden stool. Beside the stool a canvas apron hangs on a peg. Beside the apron a pair of thick leather gloves. Beside the gloves a coal scoop hung on a hook. And in the corner beyond a plain iron rack of shovels, 3 of them, of different sizes, for different work at the fires. The boiler man is here. His name is Patrick. He is a widower in his 50s, with 2 grown children in Providence, and a small room on the servants' floor overlooking the sunken garden. He has been in this room for 8 years. He wears a canvas apron over ordinary trousers and a plain shirt, a soft cap on his head, thick leather boots on his feet. He is not a large man, but he is a strong one, with the forearms of a man who has moved coal for most of his working life. He stands at the first furnace. He opens the iron door with a hook, and a great oblong of orange firelight is thrown out across the whitewashed brick and down onto the pale grey tile floor. He looks in at the fire. It is even. The coal we saw come down the tunnel an hour ago is already burning at the back, in a red bed a foot deep. He takes a shovel from the rack, takes one heaped shovel of fresh coal from the bin beside the furnace, and sets it into the fire at the front of the bed, spread flat with the tip of the shovel so as not to smother the flame. He closes the door with a hook. The orange oblong on the wall disappears. The room is dim again, lit only by the small ceiling bulb over the pine table. He steps sideways to the second furnace and he does the same. He opens, he looks, he shovels, he closes, he steps back. He glances at both pressure gauges. Both needles are steady in the middle of their arcs. He glances at both water glasses. Both black lines are steady at their middle marks. He nods once, and he sits down on the stool. This is the night rate. The house, in the winter, with the family away, is held at a steady 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit through every room. That is enough to keep the marble mantles from spalling in a cold spell, enough to keep the silk on the walls from cracking, enough to keep the pipes from freezing, enough to keep the palms in the conservatory alive. It is not warm. It is not the summer warm of the family in residence, when the house is held at 65 or 68 through every room. It is a caretaker's warm, and it is held in winter by feeding the 2 furnaces at a rhythm that Patrick has in the palm of his hand. A shovel on each, then a 2-hour wait, then a shovel on each, then a 2-hour wait. 2 great coal furnaces in the boiler room, 2 shovels per round, on through the night. He sits. He looks at the mica windows in the 2 furnace doors. Both fires are steady. He looks at the small clock on the wall by the pine table, a plain round railway clock, easy to read by night. It is a little past 8. He has an hour before his next round. He picks up a small book from the corner of the pine table, opens it, and reads. The book is a copy of Melville's Moby Dick in the fat American edition of a few years earlier. Patrick has read it before. He's reading it again slowly, a chapter at a time on the small hours between fires. He likes the whaling. He likes the ship's carpenter. He does not know why. He likes the book. It is his book. It came from a small shop in Newport a few years ago, and it has stayed on this pine table since. The room is warm around him. The low sustained roar of the furnaces is so steady that a man who works in it hardly hears it any more. It is like the sound of a fair wind through a shroud on a ship at anchor. It is part of the room. The faint sweetness of good bituminous coal burning slow is on the air. The small tin mug on the table has cooled from tea into cold tea, but he does not mind. He reads. The invisible thing this room makes is steam, and the steam is climbing right now, quietly and slowly, up into every wall of the house. That is the next room in a way, and it is the whole house at once. Consider for a moment what a boiler in a basement in 1901 actually does. You feed coal to a fire under a great tank of water. The fire heats the water becomes steam. The steam, being lighter than water, rises. It rises out of the top of the boiler and into a system of cast iron pipes, called risers, that run up through the walls of the house from the basement to the family floor and even to the servants' floor above that. The risers deliver the steam to radiators, and the radiators, being fitted with valves at their bottoms and vents at their tops, let the steam in, let it cool, let it condense into water again, and the water runs back down through a second set of pipes to the boiler, and the whole cycle begins again. There is no fan, there is no fuel line except the coal at the fire, there is no combustion in the walls of the house. Everything that heats the marble rooms and the silk drapes and the family bedrooms is invisible. The invention had not always been there. If you had built the Elms 50 years earlier, in 1850, you would have heated it as every great American house of the earlier century had been heated, from open fires in great fireplaces, one per room, each one fed by a hall boy with a scuttle, each one throwing out its heat unevenly, each one requiring a rake and a poker and an ash pan and a chimney sweep. It would have been a warm house in a rough sense and a smoky one. The panels would have carried the smell of wood smoke and coal smoke in their grain forever. There would have been, in every room, the small pale rectangle above the mantel where the paintings had darkened at the top. By 1899, when the Elms was being designed, that was over. The central steam plant had come in. It had begun with hotels in the 1860s, and moved through the great office buildings in the 1870s and into the private houses of the very rich in the 1880s, and by the 1890s it was the ordinary comfort of a house of this class. Trumbauer designed the Elms around it. He put the 2 great furnaces in the basement. He ran the risers, in cast iron, in wall chases behind the panels. He set the radiators in every principal room, in every family bedroom, in every guest room, in every servant's room, in the pantries, in the china room, even in the wine cellar to keep the labels from mould. And he concealed each radiator behind a carved wooden grill, and each grill he made a part of the room's woodwork so that a person standing in the ballroom looking at the gaudies on the walls would never see, in the wainscot below, the small open-work panel through which the warm air came into the room. The invention did more than warm the house. It made the house possible. It made possible the unlined French silk on the walls of the Louis salons, which cannot bear the smoke of an open fire and cannot bear a swing of temperature. It made possible the walnut panelling of the dining room, which would crack in a cold room and split in a hot one. It made possible the palms in the North Conservatory, which want a steady temperature and a steady humidity, and could not survive a Newport winter fed by an open grate. It made possible, most of all, the great, quiet, still, even temperature of a Berwind winter house in New York or Newport, in which a guest could sit at any hour in any room and never see a maid come with a scuttle. Come back a moment into the staterooms. Let us walk them again in the winter dark, not to check the shutters this time, but to feel the heat. In the ballroom, along the base of the walls, at intervals of about 10 feet, there are small carved wooden grilles set into the wainscot. Each grille is about 18 inches wide and 6 inches tall, and each is carved in the same acanthus leaf pattern as the rest of the wainscot. Behind each grille is a radiator. In the winter dark, the ballroom is at a steady 55 degrees. There is no draught. There is no warm patch and no cold patch. There is only the same even temperature everywhere. In the walnut dining room, the grilles are set into the panels, and their pattern is the same as the small motif carved into the mouldings of the great oak doors. In the Chinese breakfast room, the grilles are hidden in the darkened lacquer of the lowest of the panels, and you cannot see them at all unless you know they are there. In the vestibule, the grilles are set into the marble wainscot, and their pattern is a small marble openwork copied from a French model. In the family bedrooms, the grilles are simpler. In the guest rooms, simpler still. In the servants' rooms on the top floor, there are no grilles and no radiators. That is a truth to sit with, because the servants' floor is heated only by the general rising of warm air through the service stairwells, and on a cold night the servants' rooms are unquestionably cold. The maids sleep in flannel nightgowns under 3 wool blankets, and that has been true from the day the house opened. Both things are true. The staterooms are warm, and the servants' rooms are cold. The two facts sit on top of each other in the same house, floor by floor, and neither cancels the other. The narration is not going to argue about this. It is going to sit with it. The fire in the family drawing-room hearth, tonight, is a courtesy fire only. It is a small heap of coals in the grate, kept alight, so that if the master were to come up unexpectedly, he would find a live fire waiting. It gives off no real heat that the room needs. It gives off, now and then, a small dry sound as a coal settles, and that small sound is one of the truest sounds of a warm empty room in a New England winter. It is a sound Hermione loved. It is one of the reasons she chose the pale blue silk she chose. Behind the panels in the risers, the steam is climbing quietly and slowly. The faint hiss of steam in the risers behind the panels is one of the perfect winter sounds of the house, so quiet that you can only hear it if you stop and put an ear against the panel, and even then it is a whisper. Patrick, downstairs, sits on his stool with his book. He does not need to hear the hiss. He hears the pressure gauges. When the needle on one drops a fraction, he knows a radiator has drawn a little more, and he waits and the needle recovers, and he goes on reading. He earns for this about $70 a month with his board and his room on the servants' floor. That is a good wage for a man of his generation in this trade, one of the highest in the male house staff, because the job requires skill, judgment, and a steady hand at the pressure gauge, and because a poorly run boiler could crack a marble mantle and split a pipe, and cost the master a great deal more than $70 a month. It is a fair wage for skilled invisible work, and it is worth saying gently, as a small return to the honestest proportions of the house, and somewhere beneath us a furnace door opens on its hinge, and the firelight lays its warm oblong along the whitewashed brick, and above us the watchman has just come up the service stair to begin his round. The furnaces are steady, the rounds are being walked, the house is warm at every level. At 10 o'clock at night the night watchman comes on. He has slept the afternoon in his small room on the servants' floor. He has taken his supper with the household in the servants' hall a little earlier. He is on his feet now, in his boots and his coat, in a small room off the boiler room corridor that the household calls the watchman's cupboard, though it is a proper little room and not a cupboard at all. It has a small deal table, a chair, a peg for a coat, a peg for a hat, and a shelf for his one piece of equipment. He takes the piece of equipment off the shelf and hangs it around his neck. The piece of equipment is his portable watchman's clock. It is a detex, a small round brass and leather instrument about the size of a large pocket watch, hung on a plaited leather strap that goes over the shoulder and lets the clock ride against the hip. It weighs about 2 pounds. Inside the case, sealed against interference, is a paper disc marked with the numbers of the stations on the round, one number for each station, and a small clockwork movement that keeps time. Around the outside of the case are a small crystal window and a small keyhole. When he inserts a station key into the keyhole and turns it, the movement stamps onto the paper disc inside the exact time that station key was turned. The disc is sealed. He cannot open it. Only the housekeeper in the morning will unseal it and read what he has stamped and confirm that every station was reached at the right hour. The reason for the clock is not, as it may seem to a modern eye, a lack of trust. The reason for the clock is, to use a phrase from the trade literature of the time, that the record meant his job performance could not be questioned. That is the small dignity of the object. It is a machine that lets a night watchman prove, without argument, that he did his work. A house of this class did not want a watchman who might one night cut a round short and be accused and defend himself and have no way of proving what he had done. The clock on his hip was his witness. It was his testimonial. It was the thing that, at breakfast, let the housekeeper say in the ordinary way that the round was walked as it should be, and let him go up to his room in peace. He does not carry a revolver. The great houses of Bellevue Avenue did not permit their watchmen to carry a revolver. The reasoning was simple, and Birch could recite it in his sleep. A watchman with a gun is a watchman ready to shoot at a houseguest returning late. A watchman with a gun is a watchman who, in a dark corridor, mistakes a footstep for an intruder. The great houses of Newport were not in these years houses that had ever been robbed, and they did not intend to be, and the presence of a walked round was the deterrent. Give a night watchman a lamp and a stick, not a firearm. His lamp tonight is a small brass hand lamp of the sort we have already seen the caretaker carry. A squat little thing with a wick and a small oil reservoir and a plain brass handle. Over one half of the glass is a red globe so that his own light will not dazzle his own eyes as he walks, and so that he can enter a dark room and see into it without a hard shadow that would confuse him. He lights the lamp at the small deal table. The wick catches. The room fills with a very small orange glow. He picks up his stick, a plain hickory rod with a leather thong at the top for his wrist, and he is ready. His round is fixed. It has been fixed since the house opened, and no watchman has ever varied it, and no housekeeper has ever asked one to. It runs from the boiler room, where the first key is set into the wall by the door, up through the basement corridors, up the service stair to the ground floor, through the staterooms in the same order the footman walked them earlier, up to the family floor, up to the servants' floor and back down. 8 stations in all, one on each floor and one at each end of the ground floor. He must walk it in about 50 minutes. Then he has 10 minutes for himself, in the watchman's cupboard, before he walks it again. 8 rounds a night, one on the hour from 10 in the evening to 6 in the morning. He begins. He walks along the boiler room corridor softly, in his soft leather boots. He passes the door to the boiler room and hears through the door the low sustained roar of the furnaces. He does not enter. He walks past. He turns left into the main basement corridor and walks along it, past the china room, past the silver room, past the housekeeper's office. At the far end of the corridor, near the foot of the service stair, is the first key station, a small iron box screwed to the wall, with a small brass key hanging on a chain from it. He unhooks the key. He inserts the key into the keyhole of the clock on his hip. He turns it. He hears the small click as the movement inside stamps the time onto the paper disc. He rehooks the key. He walks on, up the service stair. Slowly. He does not, in the corridor above, turn on any of the ceiling lights. He knows the corridor by heart. His red-globed lamp throws a small warm circle at his boots. He walks through the vestibule. He walks through the ballroom, along one long wall in the near dark, past the gardies, back along the other long wall. He walks through the walnut dining room, through the Louis salons, through the Chinese breakfast room, through the north conservatory, where the palms are quiet in the warm air. At the far end of the ground floor, near the small library, is his second station, the small iron box, the small brass key on its chain, the click of the clock, up the family stair, along the family floor corridor, past the mistress's bedroom door closed, past the master's closed, past the guest rooms, past Miss Julia's suite. At the end of the corridor, the third station, click, up the small back stair to the servants' floor. Along the corridor of small bedrooms, the doors are closed. Behind some of them are the soft sleeping sounds of the maids and the men who have gone up. He walks quietly. His fourth station is at the far end of this corridor, by the door that leads to the small attic loft, where the trunks and the summer awnings are kept. The small iron box, the click. He turns and walks back, down to the family floor, down to the ground floor, along the staterooms in the other direction, down to the basement, along the basement corridor, down to the boiler room corridor, back to the door of his watchman's cupboard. He does not enter yet, because his fifth station is here, and there are 3 more on the second round. He clicks. He rests a moment against the wall. He is not tired. He has been on the round for about 45 minutes. He has 10 minutes before 11 o'clock. He goes into his cupboard, sits at the deal table, sets down the lamp, and closes his eyes without sleeping. While the watchman climbs, the boilerman below has just been brought a tray, and we can sit with him for a chapter and watch him eat. A little after 11 o'clock, at the top of the servants' stair, the housekeeper hands a small covered tray to a maid, and the maid brings the tray down. She comes down the stairs slowly, the tray held level in both hands, and she passes along the basement corridor, and she passes the china room and the silver room and the little office, and she comes to the boiler room door. She does not knock, because Patrick does not like a knock, and because the door is not truly a private door. She pushes the door open with her shoulder. She comes down the 3 or 4 steps into the whitewashed vault. She sets the tray on the small pine table in the corner. The tray is a plain oval of tin, painted black on the outside and white on the inside, with a rim to keep the plates from sliding. Under a white cloth are a covered dish, a small plate, a bread roll, a small pot of butter, a mug, and a small jug of milk. She sets the mug down. She sets the jug down. She lifts the cloth. Under the covered dish is a plate of hot beef and gravy and mashed potatoes, and a small heap of peas from a summer jar, all warm from the servants' hall's own second dinner. The bread roll is fresh from the morning's bake. The butter is from the pantry. The milk is from the small ice box in the dairy corner. She lifts the lid, sets it on the tray, and steps back. Patrick nods to her. He does not speak. He does not need to speak. She knows the routine. She turns and goes back up the steps and out of the door and back along the corridor and up the stairs. Patrick puts down his book, which he has kept open on the table by his stool. He marks his place with a folded corner because he does not like a bookmark and he does not like a slip of paper that might fall out. He stands up. He walks to the pine table. He takes off his gloves and hangs them on the peg. He rolls up his shirt sleeves a further inch because his cuffs are already a little dark from the coal. He wipes his hands on the folded cloth by the plate. He sits on the small stool at the table, and he eats. He eats without ceremony. He's a man who has taken his supper alone for most of his working life, and there is nothing sad about it and nothing to fuss over. He cuts the beef with a small pocket knife. He forks it in even bites. He mops the gravy with the bread roll. He drinks the tea. He butters the last of the bread with the small horn spoon in the butter dish. He is not, in the whole time he eats, further than 5 paces from the 2 great furnaces. Between the second forkful and the third he glances at the mica window of the first furnace, and the fire is even, and he goes on. The scene is one of the small good scenes of the night. A man at a plain pine table in the corner of a warm whitewashed vault, eating a plain dinner brought down on a tray, 3 paces from the 2 fires he tends. No conversation, because none is needed. No hurry, because he has time. No fanfare, because the work does not care for fanfare. There is a small ritual after the tea. He rolls a cigarette with one hand, the way a man does who has been rolling his own for 30 years, and he sits with the unlit cigarette between his fingers a moment. He does not smoke it. He does not smoke in the boiler room. He never has. He rolls one after his supper because his hands need something to do, and then he sets it in the small brass ashtray on the table for later, when he might go out for a minute into the yard for air. He drinks the last of the tea. The tea has cooled a little. It does not matter. He covers the empty plate with the folded cloth again. He sets the covered lid back on the dish. He gathers the tray at its rim with 2 hands and sets it neatly on the corner of the table. In a while, when the maid comes back for it, it will go up. Now he stands. He glances at the small railway clock on the wall. It is a little before 11:30. He has some minutes before his next fire round on the 2-hour rhythm. He picks up the shovel by the first furnace. He does not open the door. He steps back to the pine table. He does not sit. He stands quietly at the door. There is something restful about a man simply standing in his own room, at the end of his supper, waiting for the next thing. Patrick is standing that way. His hands are at his sides. The furnaces are quiet in their low sustained roar. The lit end of the tunnel outside is quiet. The corridor beyond the door is quiet. Above him, 4 floors up on the servants' floor, the maids are asleep in their small cold rooms, and the warmth he keeps steady is coming up through the floors between him and them. He likes the night shift. This is a real preference. Some boilermen ask for the day, so that they can see their families in the evening, so that they can sit in a kitchen with their wife and their children in the ordinary way. Patrick has no wife and no children in the house. He has his 2 grown children in Providence, and a small pension of memory of his own wife, and he prefers in the winter months the quiet of a night in this warm room to the noise of the day shift, with the housekeeper's messengers and the tunnel men and the coal deliveries and the housemaids passing along the corridor. In the night no one comes. The house does its own quiet work above him. He does his own quiet work below. The pressure gauges tick their small ticks. The fires burn even. The book waits on his stool. His next round is at midnight. Between now and then he has half an hour of nothing, and half an hour of nothing is a small gift on a working night. He picks up his book from the stool, turns to his mark page, and reads a chapter. There is nothing dramatic in the chapter. There is a description of a piece of rigging on a whaling ship. He reads it twice, because he likes the description. Then he closes the book, marks the corner, sets it back on the stool, and stands up again. It is nearly midnight. While he settles again, the tunnel men are finishing the last cart of the day. Midnight is nearly on us, and their shift is about to end. The last cart of the tunnel men's night is loaded a little before midnight. Out in the below-grade yard, in the cold, the yardman has one final chute of coal to shoot down, and he opens the small iron gate over the pushcart's box, and the coal slides in with its dull, soft sound, several 100 pounds of it in one shot, and the gate closes. John steadies the front handle. The boy steadies the back. They lean into the load. The wheels squeak once softly, and the cart begins its last walk down the tunnel. They do not speak as they go. They know it is the last one. The lit string of small incandescent bulbs runs on ahead of them along the crown of the vault, giving that steady, soft yellow light, and the walls of banked black coal beside them run past in tidy slopes. The air grows warmer as they go because the boiler room is drawing them in, and by the halfway point their leather aprons are open at the neck and the boy has pushed his cap back on his forehead. The tunnel is warm. It has been the whole night's warm road under a cold lawn. At the far end the cart rolls through the arch into the coal vault. John does not tip the load into the boilerman's bin. He tips this last load into the bin nearest the door so that Patrick will find it first when he wakes for his midnight round in a few minutes. It is a small courtesy of the crew. Then John hangs the iron scoop back on its hook. The boy leans on the cart's handle, resting a second. They stand there in the vault a moment, in the borrowed warmth from the boiler room next door, and John says quietly, "That will do us," and the boy nods. Then they turn the empty cart and they push it back out along the tunnel into the yard, and they set it under the chute for the morning crew. They lean over the small brake shack a moment to check that the yardman has already made his own last mark in the daybook and is going home. He has. They walk back through the mouth into the tunnel again, because the way back into the house for them is not out the yard gate, but along the tunnel to the coal vault, up the little iron door into the boiler room corridor, and up the servants' stair to the servants' hall. Come with them, down the tunnel one more time, past the bulbs, past the banked walls, into the vault. John does not knock at the boiler room door because Patrick is not to be disturbed at the top of an hour, and because the men have their own way in. They step through the vault into the corridor, past the door, along the corridor past the china room and the silver room, and up the servants' stair. The servants' hall is nearly empty at this hour. The plates from 7 have long been cleared. The small pot-bellied stove in the corner has been damped down. One of the wall lamps has been turned off, and only the small ceiling lamp over the middle of the table is on, and a hall boy is sitting at the corner in his shirt sleeves reading a newspaper. He looks up when they come in. He stands, and he sets the paper down. There is a small covered basin on the sideboard. There are 2 plates under a cloth, kept warm from the servants' supper for the tunnel men. There is a great pot of tea on the stove kept a little warm. It is a plain late supper, the same joint of cold beef from earlier, potatoes, pickled onions, bread, a small dish of jam. The hall boy sets it out. Before they sit, John and the boy walk over to the stone sink by the door. They wash their hands. The soap is a plain yellow bar. The water runs cold from a pump handle. John washes his hands twice, because the coal dust is in the seams of them and does not come out on the first wash. He dries them on the coarse towel hanging on a peg. The boy does the same. Then they sit at the table, and the hall boy sets a plate in front of each of them, and pours their tea and steps back. They eat. Both of them are hungry now, in the way that only men who have been on their feet for 6 hours in a warm tunnel are hungry. They do not talk. The room is warm around them. The small ceiling lamp is soft. The hall boy has gone back to his newspaper in the corner and is not listening. Above the door hangs the annunciator board, silent still, its brass bells motionless in their 3 rows. John eats slowly in the manner of a man who has learned to eat slowly because he can. The boy eats more quickly because he is younger. When they finish, they both stand at the same time, without a signal, and they take the plates to the sideboard and they set them there, and they thank the hall boy with a nod. He nods back. They go out through the small door at the back of the servants' hall, which gives on to the base of the servants' stair up to the top floor. Up they go, 2 flights. The stair is narrow and steep, with a plain iron rail on one side, and it turns twice, and at each turn there is a small landing with a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. On the last landing, the door to the servants' floor. They open it softly. They step out into the long, low corridor. The corridor of the servants' floor is a plainer world than any we have walked yet in this house. Whitewashed plaster on the walls, a pine floor uncarpeted painted a pale grey, small dormer windows facing inward onto the concealed central well of the roofline. Along both sides of the corridor, small numbered doors, each with a small painted card giving the name of its occupant. John's door is near the far end. The boy's is in the middle. They walk quietly, because most of the doors have people asleep behind them. At his own door, John pauses a moment. He turns to the boy. He says in a low voice, "Good work tonight." The boy says, "Good night." John opens his door, steps into his small room, and closes the door behind him. The boy walks on to his own door and does the same. In a few minutes both of them will have taken off their boots and their aprons and their shirts and washed at the small basin in the room, and both of them will be under the wool blankets on the small iron bed, and both of them will be asleep. The tunnel is done for the night. The morning crew will come in at 5, and far below, a furnace door swings on its iron, and firelight throws a bright oblong across the pale grey tile. and above us the clocks in the halls are beginning to strike midnight, all slightly out of phase. The furnaces are steady. The rounds are being walked. The house is warm at every level. Midnight arrives in the Elms not as a single stroke, but as a slow procession. There are over 30 clocks in the house, of every kind, in every principal room, and in most of the smaller ones, and each of them was set on its own day, and each of them keeps its own small drift, and each of them, in this decade, is wound weekly by the same slow, careful footman on a Monday morning. When midnight comes, they strike not together, but one after another, from room to room, in a small, ordered wave that takes almost a full minute to pass through the house. The first to strike is the great long case clock in the ballroom. It is a tall English piece in walnut with a brass dial and a slow deep bell, and it strikes midnight in a long even count of 12, spaced about a second apart, with a small pause at 6 and again at 10. The bell rings out into the empty ballroom, into the great space between the two gardies, up into the high ceiling and back down. In the near dark, the sound seems to travel a great distance. The paintings do not move, the chandelier does not move. But the sound lays a great long ring on the room, and it fades, and the ballroom is silent again. 2 seconds after the ballroom clock finishes, the walnut dining room clock begins. It is a smaller French mantel clock on the marble mantel between the two great windows, and its bell is higher and quicker, and it strikes 12 in a bright even count, faster than the ballroom's slow one. The sound rings off the walnut panels and the polished table. Then, in almost the same moment, the vestibule clock begins. It is a very tall French piece in the corner by the great door, a bronze figure of a shepherdess on its cap, and it strikes 12 in a slow lyrical count, with a small chime at the quarter that is only a leftover of the way it was cast. The sound rolls off the marble, and then the Louis XV salon clock, in its small gold French frame on the small marble mantel, and then the Louis XVI salon clock in its pale blue frame, and then the clock in the Chinese breakfast room, and then the small clock in the North Conservatory that has been given a wick of oil so it does not stop in the winter chill, and then the little clock in the small library, and then the family sitting room clock, and then the smoking room clock. Upstairs, in almost the same wave, though a little late, the family floor clocks begin. The clock in the master's bedroom, the clock in the mistress's bedroom, the small clock in the octagonal sitting room between them, the clock in Miss Julia's sitting room over the porte-cochere, the clocks in each of the 5 guest rooms. Each strikes 12, each is a slightly different bell, a slightly different rhythm, a slightly different tone. On the servants' floor, 1 clock, a plain American piece on the wall of the little upper servants' sitting room, in a wooden case, with a plain steel bell. It strikes 12, cleanly, in 12 even little sounds. It is the last of the wave. Below stairs, on the pantry's corridor, the small clock in the housekeeper's office strikes at almost the same moment, and at last, the small railway clock in the boiler room, the plainest of them all, strikes with a single small click and nothing more, because it is not a striking clock. The whole wave takes, if you were to time it, about a minute. It is the small daily orchestra of the house. It is the great instrument being played very slowly by the man who winds it. That man is a footman. Let us say his name was George. He's not the same footman as Thomas of the staterooms round. His work is the winding, and his work is done once a week on a Monday morning from 9 until 11. He walks the whole house with a leather winding key on a small ring, a soft cloth in his pocket, and a small notebook with the list of clocks. At each clock he pauses. He opens the case with a small brass hook. He removes the pendulum weight if the case requires it. He winds the 2 or 3 keys of the movement with slow, careful turns, feeling for the resistance that tells him the spring is full. He does not overwind. He does not underwind. He takes each clock's own particular action into his fingers, because a French mantel clock does not wind the same as an English long case, and a small American shelf clock does not wind the same as either. He sets the pendulum swinging with a light touch. He waits a moment to hear the tick begin evenly. He compares the clock's face to his own good pocket watch, which is set to the town's ordinary time. He adjusts if he must by a small quarter minute, no more. He closes the case. He wipes the case with the cloth. He makes his mark in his notebook, one small tick beside the clock's name. He walks on. 2 hours, 30 clocks, 30 small acts of care. In a house with a family and residents, no one would notice the winding was being done, because George is a small, quiet man, and he walks the corridors between the family's own movements and never in front of them. In a house with the family away, no one would notice the winding was being done because there is no one to notice. Only in the small ordered wave of the striking at midnight can you feel that all the clocks are wound, all the pendulums are swinging, all the small springs are full. There is something in this small ordinary work of keeping time that goes very deep in the story of a great house. A house is only a house if the hours are kept. A house of this class, with 60 rooms and 30 clocks and 100 people passing through it in season, and a small skeleton crew in winter, must run to time or it comes apart. The dinner cannot be late. The meeting of the trains cannot be missed. The maid at the door cannot be a minute past the ring of the bell. So a footman walks the house on a Monday morning and winds the clocks, and every night at midnight the small wave passes through the rooms, and the house holds together in time. It is a small honoured duty. It is a duty that would not be listed in a modern job description. It is a duty done quietly, on a set morning, by a man whose name is not written in the ledger of the wonders of Newport. But it is one of the reasons the house is a house. The last of the midnight wave dies out on the servants' floor. The small clock in the upper servants' sitting room finishes its 12. The corridor is silent again. The house holds its own hour. Nothing else moves. While the clocks fade, the boilerman is moving to the first furnace, and the ash pans are being raked out. The coal is about to make its return journey. At midnight, Patrick stands. He picks up the ash rake from the rack of tools. It is a long iron tool, 5 feet long, with a flat blade at the working end angled at about 20 degrees to the shaft, and a wooden handle wrapped in leather at the other end. He walks to the first furnace. He opens the iron door with the hook. The great oblong of orange firelight is thrown out across the whitewashed brick and down onto the pale grey tile floor. He crouches, in the way a working man crouches low on his heels, one hand steadying himself on the front of the furnace. He slides the ash rake under the firebox into the ash pit below the fire. He draws it slowly toward himself. The rake comes out full of a fine pale grey ash, still faintly warm, some of it with the small dark hearts of embers still in it. He does not empty the rake straight onto the tile floor. He tips it into a large iron ash pan set at his feet, a plain iron box on wheels about 18 inches square and 12 inches deep, with a low iron handle at each end for carrying. He slides the rake back under the firebox. He draws it again. Another load of ash comes out. He tips it in. He does this a third time and a fourth time, until the pit under the first firebox is clean. He stands up. His knees do not creak. He is used to it. He looks in at the fire, which is now sitting on a clean grate over an empty pit. The fire is even. He takes his shovel, takes a heaped shovel of fresh coal from the bin beside the furnace, sets it in at the front of the firebed, spreads it flat and closes the door with the hook. The oblong of firelight dies. The room is dim again. He wheels the ash pan on its low wheels along the tile floor over to the second furnace. He opens, he crouches, he rakes, he tips, he does the second ash pit. He stands, he shovels new coal into the second fire, he closes the door, he steps back. Now he has 2 ash pans full of pale grey ash sitting on the tile floor by the 2 furnaces. He wheels them, one at a time, out of the boiler room, through the iron door into the coal vault and along the vault to the tunnel arch. The pans are heavy. Not impossibly heavy, but heavy enough that he's careful with them. He does not want a wheel to catch. He does not want an ash to spill. At the tunnel arch he lifts the first pan onto the small iron pushcart on its rails. It fits neatly. He lifts the second pan on beside it. He steadies them. He takes hold of the front handle. He pushes the cart along the rails, out of the vault, into the tunnel, and up toward the yard. This is the return journey. The tunnel is warm still, and lit with its steady string of bulbs, and the small rolling squeak of the wheels on the iron rails is the same as it was when John and the boy were bringing coal down. Only the direction is reversed. Instead of a wedge of black bituminous being brought in, 2 pans of pale grey ash are being taken out. Patrick pushes the cart the whole 150 feet of the tunnel on his own. He is used to it. He does the ash haul once each night in the small hours, when the tunnel men are gone and the yardman is not yet back. It is his own quiet piece of the whole cycle. He does not mind. He likes the walk. He likes the small cold that starts to bite him as he nears the mouth of the tunnel. He likes the ordinary business of tipping the ash into the waiting ash car on the tracks. At the tunnel mouth he leaves the cart just inside so the ash pans are out of the immediate weather. He carries the first pan, in a slow, steady way, up the 4 small stone steps to the loading platform of the yard, and he tips it, in one careful motion, into the open top of a small ash car standing on the spur beside the coal cars. The ash goes in with a soft dry sound and a small pale cloud that catches for a moment on the cold air and drifts away. He sets the empty pan down. He picks up the second pan. He carries it up the steps. He tips it. Same soft sound, same small cloud. He stands a moment at the top of the platform in the cold and he looks at the yard. The 4 coal hoppers we watched come in at 5 in the afternoon are now only 2/3 full, because so much has been wheeled down through the night. The 2 ash cars are filling steadily. In the morning, when the switching engine comes back with the fresh string, it will collect the 2 ash cars along with the empties, and the ash will be carried away for morning collection. He turns and comes back down the steps. He picks up the 2 empty pans, one in each hand, and carries them back down the tunnel to the boiler room. He sets them by the 2 furnaces. He hangs the ash rake back on the rack. He wipes his hands on the cloth by the pine table. He sits for a moment on the stool. There is a small, honest disproportion sitting in the whole cycle we have just watched, and it is worth carrying with the quiet wonder of the whole night. On a cold January night at the Elms, Patrick and his 2 furnaces will burn something like 1.5 tons to 2 tons of coal between dusk and dawn. That is the estimate of the Preservation Society, and of the comparison to the other Newport cottages of this size. 2 tons of coal in one night, for a house whose family are not in it. 300 tons of coal in a whole Newport winter, for a house whose family are only in it a few weeks a year. The number can startle you the first time you hear it, and the story to sit with gently is not indignation at the number. It is wonder at the machine. 2 men in a warm, bright room under a lawn, and a tunnel of coal, and the fires going even, and the marble rooms above them held at 55 degrees so that the silk on the walls does not crack, and the palms in the conservatory do not die. That is what the 2 tons a night are for. It is not a waste. It is a keeping. The narration will hold that quietly, and while the ash rolls out, the caretaker upstairs is starting his second round of the night. That is our next chapter, a slow candle carried along the seaside of the house. Between 1 and 2 in the morning, when the watchman is on his 3rd round, and the boilerman has taken his own quiet quarter hour on the stool with his book, Mr. Doyle, the caretaker, leaves his small ground-floor rooms in the north wing, and walks his second round of the night. His first round of the night was at dusk, when he lit the small caretaker's lamp in his own window, and walked the ground floor quickly to see that the staterooms had been closed for the winter, and to check that the great outer doors were bolted. His second round is a longer, slower one. He walks the whole house, from the boiler room up to the servants' floor, checking not for intruders and not for a fire, but for the small quiet failures a winter can visit on a great house that is not lived in. He takes with him a candle in a hurricane glass. He does not use his own switch key on the corridor lights. In the winter, when the family are away, the electric light is off in most of the corridors after midnight, and a candle in a hurricane glass held by the handle is a truer light for this kind of walk. The hurricane glass is a plain little brass and glass thing, with a wire cage over the top to protect the flame from a draught. The candle inside is a plain wax candle 4 inches high, and it will burn for 1.5 hours, which is longer than the round takes. If the walk goes long, he has a fresh candle in his pocket. He also has in the other pocket a small taper, in case he must relight a fire that has failed. He starts in the basement. He walks the corridor along the north wing, past the boiler room door where the low sustained roar of the furnaces is at its steady note, past the coal vault door which is closed, past the china room, past the silver room, past the housekeeper's office. He does not enter any of them. He listens at each door for a beat, in the way of a man who has learned to listen, and he moves on. He climbs the service stair to the ground floor. He walks the staterooms in the order Thomas walked them earlier, but this time in silence and by candlelight. In the ballroom, he crosses the great parquet floor slowly, the candle's small light throwing a moving shadow of himself on the far wall. He does not stop at the paintings. He crosses to the west windows, and he lifts the corner of a drape and he checks the shutter behind it. Every shutter in the west and north sides of the ground floor he checks, one by one, because the west and north are where the sea wind comes in, and where a poorly latched shutter would let a corner of frost in against a jamb. He finds nothing. He walks on, he crosses the dining room, he crosses the Louis salons, he crosses the Chinese breakfast room, he crosses the north conservatory, where the palms are still warm and quiet in the steady heat, and he touches one leaf with the back of his hand, and it is not brittle. He walks on, he climbs the family stair. He walks the family floor more slowly than the staterooms, because the family floor is where a small failure of a radiator would be most costly. In each principal bedroom, he pauses. He goes to the wall by the mantel and puts his hand against the carved wooden grille. He feels for the warm air rising through it. In each bedroom the warm air is coming through. The grille is warm to the back of his hand. The radiator behind it is doing its work. In the mistress's bedroom he does the same. The grille is warm. The room is at its steady winter temperature. The portrait of Hermione hangs in the flicker of his candle, and the shimmering white of her gown catches for a second as the flame moves, and then it settles. He climbs the small back stair to the servants' floor. He walks along the corridor of small bedrooms in his soft slippers, because he does not want to wake the maids or the men. He does not put his candle up. He passes each door softly. He goes on to the far end, where a small door gives onto the small attic loft above the servants' rooms, where the trunks and the summer awnings are kept and where a leak in the roof would show first. He opens the door with a small key on his own ring. He steps inside. He looks up at the beams of the roof. He listens for a drip. There is none. He closes the door. He walks back down through the whole house, floor by floor. He is a slow walker. He is not tired. On the way down, he glances again at the shutters he has already checked, in a small last confirming look, and again finds nothing amiss. He arrives back at his own small ground floor room in the north wing. He blows out the candle. He puts the hurricane glass on the shelf by the door for the next round. He sits at his small desk, in the light of his own reading lamp, and he takes down his weekly notebook. The weekly notebook is a simple thing. It is a small bound book of the plain sort a shop clerk would use for orders, and Doyle keeps it in the drawer of his desk. In it each week he writes a short report of the state of the property. The report goes, on a Friday, in the ordinary mail, up to the master's steward in the New York house on 64th Street. Edward Berwind reads the reports on a Saturday morning at his own breakfast. He reads them carefully. If a report ever spoke of a shutter that had failed and been repaired, or a radiator that had gone quiet in a corner, Edward would send back a small note in his own hand within a week, thanking Doyle for the care. Doyle writes tonight's entry. It is short. He writes that the staterooms are all secure, that all shutters on the west and north are latched, that the radiators are all warm to the hand on the family floor, that the palms in the conservatory are alive, that the boiler is at pressure and the coal supply for the week is in the vault, that no shutter and no radiator and no roof beam has failed. He signs it. He blots it. He closes the notebook. He sits for a moment with his hands in his lap. Around him the house is quiet. Above him the family floor is dark. Below him the boiler room is warm. Beyond his own small room the corridor is empty. He is the man in the house on this winter night whom the other keepers, if they thought about it, would think of as the one who is most alone. He is not alone. He is at his post. He is doing exactly what he does every night. He has been doing it for years. He will do it for years more. He turns down his reading lamp. He does not put it out. He leaves it on a low light so that a maid coming down the corridor in the small hours will see it and know he is there. He walks over to his narrow bed against the far wall. He does not undress. He lies down on top of the coverlet in his shirt and trousers and closes his eyes. He will not sleep more than an hour before his ear picks up the striking of the 2 o'clock wave through the house, and he will be up again for his short intermediate check of the outer doors. But an hour of rest on the coverlet in the low light is enough for a man of his years, and somewhere down under our feet a furnace door opens for a moment, and its light lays a soft bright oblong across the wall. And outside the temperature has fallen further, and the coldest hour of the night is about to come. The furnaces are steady, the rounds are being walked, the house is warm at every level, 3 o'clock in the morning. The wind that came off the Atlantic in the early evening has died. The trees on the west side of the lawn stand quiet. The tall French windows of the ground floor face out into a garden without any movement in it. The sea a mile to the south is only a slow distant breath, if you can hear it at all from here, and most nights you cannot. It is the coldest hour of the winter night. The air outside stands at something well below freezing. If you were to walk out through the great door onto the terrace, the cold would go into your bones inside a minute. Inside the house, the temperatures are what they have been. In the boiler room, in the low whitewashed vault under the north wing, the air stands at a steady 85 degrees. Patrick sits on his stool at the pine table with his book. His shirt sleeves are pushed up. His forehead is faintly damp. The 2 great furnaces are at their night rate, and a moment ago he laid a heavier shovel on both of them, because the outer walls of the house are drinking heat now in the way they always do at 3, and the furnaces have to answer. In the staterooms of the ground floor, the ballroom and the dining room and the salons and the Chinese breakfast room, the temperature stands at 55 degrees. No one is in any of them. The paintings hang in their proper dark. The great chandelier is still. The clocks tick. On the family floor, the temperature is the same, 55. In the mistress's bedroom, the empty bed is at 55. In the master's bedroom, the empty bed is at 55. In the guest rooms, at 55. In Miss Julia's suite, at 55. The whole floor from door to door sits at a 55 that is neither warm nor cold. It is the caretaker's warm. On the servants' floor, the temperature is a different matter. The servants' floor was cut into the roof of the house, and it is closer to the winter sky than any other floor, and it is not directly served by the risers, because the risers stop at the family floor, and the small warm air the servants' floor gets is what climbs up the service stairs and finds its way in under the doors. So on the coldest hour of a January night, the servants' floor is unquestionably cold. The corridor stands at about 45 degrees. The small bedrooms stand at about 45 degrees. Some of them, in a real cold snap, drop into the low 40s. This is the plain truth of the house, and this is one of the small tensions the narration is not going to try to argue away. The warmest room in the house tonight is the boiler room at 85 degrees, where Patrick sits with his book, and the coldest room in the house is Bridget's small room on the servants' floor at 45, where she is asleep under 3 wool blankets. Both are true at the same moment. Neither cancels the other. Bridget. Let us say her name was Bridget, because her name will do as any name for the young under-housemaid at the far end of the servants' corridor on the north side. She's 19. She came to Newport a year ago from a small town on the Rhode Island shore, and she took a place at the Elms through a cousin who had already worked here for 2 years. She is sleeping now, in her small iron bedstead against the wall, in a flannel nightgown, under 3 wool blankets. The top blanket is a heavy grey wool from a Fall River mill. The middle blanket is a plainer brown wool from the servants' issue. The bottom blanket, closest to her, is soft and cream and light, given to her by her mother when she left home. Her hair is loose on the pillow. She sleeps with her right hand tucked up under her cheek. She's warm. The room is cold, but she is warm. The 3 blankets hold her body's own heat around her, and the pine floor under the bed keeps the small draught from the corridor from finding her. She sleeps evenly and slowly. She does not dream anything she will remember in the morning. She is, in the ordinary way of a good, tired working girl, deeply asleep, and that is the whole of the story of her out. There is a small kindness the housekeeper Margaret has arranged for the winter. Every servant on the winter floor has a small stone hot water bottle wrapped in a knitted cover, and the housekeeper has a girl fill them from the kettle in the servants' hall at 10 at night, and each servant places their bottle at the foot of their bed under the blankets when they go up. By 3 in the morning the bottles are still faintly warm, though not as warm as they were, and the feet at the foot of the bed are warm too. It is a small thing. It is one of the things a good housekeeper does. It is not in the plans. It is not in the accounts. It is a kindness of the household. Downstairs, Patrick has just moved to the first furnace. He opens the iron door with the hook. The great oblong of orange firelight is thrown out across the whitewashed brick and down onto the pale grey tile floor. He looks at the fire. The fire is a little lower than he would like. He takes a shovel of coal, sets it in, spreads it with the tip of the shovel. He closes the door. He steps sideways to the second furnace. He does the same. He steps back. He glances at both pressure gauges. Both needles have recovered. He sits. Above him, on the ground floor, the staterooms sit at 55. Above them, on the family floor, the bedrooms sit at 55. Above them, on the servants' floor, the servants sit at 45, warm under their blankets. The whole small stacked cross-section of the house is holding its temperatures. The night is holding. The warmth is coming up through the floors, quiet and steady, and you can feel it if you listen for it. In the ballroom, the parquet by the wainscot is a fraction warmer than the parquet at the centre. In Bridget's room, the floor under the foot of her bed is a fraction warmer than the floor by the door, because the service stair riser passes not far from her bed, and its warm air drifts up along that inner wall. She does not know it. Her sleeping body knows it. She keeps her feet at the foot of her bed, and if this were a summer night we would be about to hear the bakery ovens open, and even in winter with the family gone that room deserves a chapter of its own, a small honouring detour. Along the basement corridor from the boiler room past the coal vault, past the door to the wine cellar, is a small room labelled on the household plans as the bakery. It is a plain little room, no more than 12 feet square. Along one wall stands a small brick oven with an iron door on the front and a chimney up the back, of the kind a French country bakery of the same generation would recognise at once. Along the opposite wall stands a wooden bench for kneading, dusted with flour that has soaked into the grain over years. Against a third wall stand 2 great iron proofing troughs and a wooden rack for the finished loaves. Above the door hangs a shelf of small copper baking moulds for the pastry work. In the summer, when the family are in residence and the house is running at full staff, this small room comes alive at 4 in the morning. The pastry man is at the oven by 4. Let us say his name was Antoine. He is a French-Canadian from Quebec, trained in a great Montreal hotel, come down to Newport 10 years ago to work summers in the private houses. He is a small, quiet man with careful hands. He wears white trousers and a white shirt and a plain apron and no hat because he cannot bear a hat while he works. At 4 in the morning in the summer, he lights the oven. The wood is set the day before. He strikes the match. He watches the paper catch, and the small twigs catch, and the split logs of birch and maple catch, and the fire settles at the back of the oven. He damps the door. He lets the oven come up to its baking heat over an hour. While the oven comes up, he takes the 2 great troughs of dough that were set to rise overnight, and he tips them out onto the wooden bench. He divides the dough with a plain wooden spatula. He shapes the loaves in the ordinary French way, folding, tucking, resting, folding again. He sets them on the wooden rack to prove a second time under a floured cloth. By 5 in the morning, the oven is at temperature and the loaves are ready. He rakes the fire to the sides of the oven with a long iron peel. He slides the loaves in on the peel, one at a time, in the neat rows a bakery must have to bake evenly. He closes the door. He waits. Then the smell begins. Anyone who has stood in a bakery at that hour, in any country, in any decade, knows the smell. It is the smell of proving bread becoming baking bread. It is a smell that has been the same smell in every kitchen of every people, for as long as people have kept bread. It is one of the truest smells there is, and it is one of the warmest. The smell rises from the small bakery, through the small door, into the basement corridor. It travels along the corridor, past the china room and the silver room, and the housekeeper's office. It rises up the service stair, into the ground floor corridor, out along the corridor to the vestibule. By the time the first breakfast tray goes up to a family bedroom at 7, the smell of the morning's bread is in every corner of the ground floor. It is one of the things the master and the mistress and Miss Julia loved about the house in the summer. But tonight it is winter. The family are away, the oven is cold, the wooden bench is dusted with a small covering of flour, but no new flour has been sifted onto it for months. The proofing troughs are clean. The wooden rack is empty. Antoine is at his own home in Newport, in a small house on the west side of the town, and he's asleep beside his wife, and he will not come in until the spring. That is the winter truth of this room, and yet the room is still worth a slow moment, because the memory of what it does is in its wood. If you were to sit here alone at 4 a.m, in the cold quiet of a winter basement, you would still be able to smell faintly in the corner where the wooden bench meets the wall a small ghost of the summer's bread. It is in the pine of the bench. It is in the small deposit of old flour in the crack between two boards. It is in the wood of the oven's doorframe. It is a smell that does not fully leave, even in the coldest and quietest months. There is a small modern thought to sit with here, if you will let me have it, and it is delivered only in wonder. When did you last stand in a room that smelled of proving bread? Not walk past a bakery, not open a bag of loaves at a supermarket. Stand in a small room with the raw dough on a wooden bench and the fire in a brick oven and the smell rising in the room. It is a very old comfort. It is not one we come across every day now. It is one of the things a great house of 1901 had every morning, all summer long at 4 a.m. for the ordinary work of the day. It is one of the small permanences that goes very deep. Even tonight, in the empty bakery in the winter, with no fire in the oven and no loaf on the rack, the small permanent smell of the summer's bread is in the wood. It is one of the small quiet gifts of an old house that has been used to a purpose for many years. The purposes leave their traces. The traces are warmed by the memory of them. Patrick, in the boiler room a few doors along, cannot smell the bread tonight. He can smell the good sweetness of the bituminous coal from Winburn, Pennsylvania, on the air of his own room. That is his smell. He knows it as Antoine knows his own smell. Both of them are small, honest permanences of the house, and both of them belong to it, and one of them is on tonight and the other is off, and they take their turns. And while the bakery sleeps, out on the tracks the morning coal is being pushed up the spur. The shift is about to change. 5 a.m, out on the eastern edge of Newport, on the coastal spur, the switching engine is on its way back. It has been sitting at the small roundhouse near the harbour since it took the empty return trip out of the yard at 5:30 the previous afternoon. It is coming down the line now with a fresh string of hopper cars, 4 of them, coupled up and pushed slowly along the track ahead of the tank engine's low black nose. The engineer this morning, let us say, is a man named Michael. He is a day switcher who takes this run 5 mornings a week in the winter and every day in the summer. He is a younger man than Frank, in his 30s. He wears a heavier coat than Frank because he takes the earlier run in the harder cold. He leans out of the cab in exactly the same way Frank did in the evening, watching the crossing at Dixon Street, easing the string in at a walking pace. The switcher noses the fresh cars down the spur into the yard past the hedge. It couples them to the 2 remaining old cars that are still standing on the spur from yesterday, and then it uncouples from the whole line. It backs up along the spur. It comes back down. It couples onto the 2 ash cars that Patrick has been filling all night. It draws them off, along the spur, back onto the coastal line, and up toward Providence in a slow chuff of white steam. The ash of last night will be at a coal yard in Providence by breakfast. The fresh coal is on the yard's stone platform for the morning crew. At exactly the same moment, at the mouth of the tunnel, 2 men are stepping through into the yard from below. They are the morning tunnel crew, come on at 5. One of them is an older man in his 60s, a very steady man of the neighbourhood, who has done the morning shift at the Elms since the house opened. Let us not name him, because his name has drifted in the record. The other is a younger man from South Kingstown come up for the winter's work. They wear the same cotton shirts and leather aprons that John and the boy wore in the evening. They walk out into the yard. They exchange a short nod with Michael, who is easing the switcher back off the spur. They begin to load their first cart of the morning under the chute, in exactly the way John and the boy loaded their first cart at 6 in the evening. The cycle begins again. Meanwhile, 4 floors up on the servants' floor, another shift is changing. In the boiler room, in the low whitewashed vault under the north wing, the day boiler man is coming on. Let us say his name was Robert. He's younger than Patrick, in his 40s, with a small house in Newport and a family there. He walks down the corridor to the iron door, opens it, comes down the 3 or 4 steps, and steps into the warm room. Patrick is already standing by the first furnace waiting for him. They do not shake hands because their hands are dirty. They do not embrace. They do the small quiet handover of 2 men who have done this exchange 5 days a week for years. Robert asks, "What has she been like?" Patrick answers, steady on both. 2 a little heavy at 3, both eased back after. Robert nods. He picks up the shovel by the first furnace. He opens the door with the hook. He looks in at the fire. He nods again. He closes the door. He sets the shovel down. Patrick takes his canvas apron off the peg. He does not put it on. He folds it once and hangs it back over the peg. He takes his book from the pine table. He puts it under his arm. He picks up his tin lunch pail from the corner, where it has been all night. He picks up his soft cap from the peg. He puts it on. He looks at Robert. He says, "All yours." Robert says, "Sleep well." They do not say more. Patrick goes up the 3 or 4 steps to the iron door. He steps out into the corridor. He walks along it, past the china room and the silver room and the housekeeper's office, past the door at the foot of the servants' stair. He goes up. At the same moment, on the ground floor, the night watchman is finishing his 8th and final round. He has been walking since 10 in the evening. He has, in his portable clock on the paper disc inside it, the record of every station he has reached at every hour, one small stamp after another, all in order, none missed. He walks now to the boiler room corridor and stands at the small deal table in his watchman's cupboard. He takes the clock from the strap on his shoulder. He waits. The housekeeper Margaret comes down the servants' stair in her plain dark dress with her keyring at her belt. She has slept a short night. She meets him at the door of the watchman's cupboard. She takes the clock from him. She takes it to her office, sits at her desk, opens the small case with her housekeeper's key, and looks at the paper disc. There are 8 stamps on it, one after another, at the 8 hours. Each stamp is in the right sequence. She writes, in her little notebook, in her own steady hand, that the round was walked as it should be. She closes the case. She hands the clock back. She thanks him in her steady way. He nods. He goes up to his own room. Now the honestest proportion of the whole night can be told out loud once, in a small warm voice, as wonder. Something like 300 tons of coal will pass down that tunnel in the course of this Newport winter. Something like 1.5 tons of it will burn in a single January night. 2 great furnaces in a low whitewashed vault will hold 60 rooms at a steady 55 degrees, 7 days a week, 3 or 4 months a year, for a family that will not be in the house until the summer, for a house whose summer season lasts about 8 weeks. That is the honest math of it. And the men who make that math work are 2 boilermen, 2 shifts of 2 tunnel men, one caretaker, one housekeeper, one night watchman, one day watchman, a small handful of wintering maids and hall boys. On this coldest morning of a Newport January, they are the whole of the house. The house is theirs. And now the first grey is coming in on the sea, and the house begins to breathe again. That is the next chapter, and it is the softest one. 6 in the morning. The night at last is beginning to give up its dark, not all at once, not with any drama. A little at a time, the way a Newport winter morning always begins. If you were standing on the frozen terrace of the Elms, you would see, out over the trees, the sky above the sea take the smallest lift of grey, not blue, not pale, simply from black to a very deep grey, as if a sheet had been shaken out very slowly over the water. The house begins to breathe again. In the servants' hall, the small pot-bellied stove in the corner has been drawn up by a girl who came down from the top floor a little before 6, and it is now giving out a real warmth. On top of the stove, a great iron kettle is coming up to the boil. On the pine table, the plain white cups have been set out for the morning tea of the day staff. The girl who set them out has gone through into the scullery to wash her hands. In the kitchen next door, the kitchen fire is being drawn up too. The cook, an older Newport woman, let us call her Mrs. Brennan, is at the range. She wears a plain grey dress and a white apron, and her hair in a low knot at the back of her head. She raked out the ashes of yesterday's fire at 5:30, laid the paper and the kindling and the small pieces of split wood, and set the coals from the coal scuttle on top. She has struck the match. The paper is catching. The kindling is catching. The coals are beginning to catch. The great iron range is coming slowly up to its working heat. Along the basement corridor, other doors are opening. The under-housemaids are coming down the service stair with their bags of tools. Each bag is a small canvas thing with a leather strap, and each holds a soft cloth, a stiff brush, a small tin of beeswax, a small tin of blacking, a pair of scissors, and a small folded apron. There are 2 of them tonight, wintering in the house. They pass through the servants' hall and take a cup of tea each from the great pot on the stove, standing at the pine table, not sitting, because they will be at their work in a few minutes. Let us say the 2 are Mary and Ellen. Let us stay with Mary, because she is the younger, and it is her turn to do the drawing rooms this week. She has red hair and a small, careful way of walking that makes almost no sound. She has been trained by the housekeeper to enter a room as silently as a shadow, and she's very good at it. She finishes her tea. She sets the cup on the sideboard. She takes her bag of tools, and she goes up the service stair to the ground floor. She walks along the corridor. She comes to the door of the drawing room. She turns the handle down slowly so that not even the catch clicks. She pushes the door open a bare few inches. She steps in. The room is at 55 degrees as it has been all night. The great fireplace is cold. The laid fire in the grate that Thomas checked at 8 last night is a small neat pyramid of paper and kindling and split wood over a small heap of coals. It has been laid for 2 months. It is time to light it, because in a few days the master may come up unexpectedly for a weekend, and it will be well that the fire has been lit before he comes, so that he can smell no month-long absence in the room. She kneels at the grate. She takes a small taper from her apron pocket. She strikes it on the little iron plate at the side of the mantel. The taper catches. She reaches into the pyramid and touches the paper. The paper catches. The kindling catches. In a moment the small heap of coals begins to redden at their edges. She sits back on her heels and watches the fire come up. It is a small warm thing in a large cold room, but it is the beginning of the day. She stands. She dusts the mantel with the soft cloth. She dusts the small ornaments on the mantel one at a time and sets each back exactly where it stood. She dusts the table by the west window. She dusts the small writing desk in the corner. She does not, in any of this, hurry. She does not, in any of this, make a sound. She's finishing the last of the west windows when the first pale grey of the day begins to fill the pane above her hands. And there is a small moment worth sitting with, and it comes only once, in wonder. The light in your own room, right now, wherever you're hearing this, is a version of that first grey. The very old comfort of a lit window at first light is one that runs from a Newport drawing room in 1901 to your own bedroom or your own kitchen or your own car in the dark. Bodies know that light. They have always known it. The mind may be miles away. The body knows that soon it will be morning and soon it will be safe to sleep. Mary finishes the drawing room. She closes the door softly behind her. She walks on to the next room and does the same. Ellen, at the far end of the ground floor, is doing the same in the smoking room and the small library. All along the ground floor of the house, in the pale grey light beginning to come through the tall windows, small careful hands are lifting the day out of the night, room by room. In the boiler room below, Robert is doing the same. He's not lighting a new fire. He's drawing up the two great fires of the night, which have been on the low maintenance rate through the small hours, and he is bringing them to a slightly heavier morning rate, so that the whole house can be warmed from 55 towards 60 in the staterooms, and towards 65 in the kitchen, ready for the day staff to work in. He opens the door of the first furnace. He looks in at the fire. He takes a heaped shovel of coal from the bin. He sets it in. He spreads it. He closes the door. He does the second. He steps back. He glances at the pressure gauges. The needles rise a fraction. The morning rate is on. Along the ground floor corridor, Mr. Doyle, the caretaker, has come out of his own small rooms. He is dressed for the day now. He walks to the vestibule. He reaches up. He turns the switch. The concealed cornice lights come on high above the marble, and a soft, even wash of light fills the room. The pilot light of the day is turned up, and somewhere below us, a furnace door swings open one last time, and the light lays a great oblong across the brick, and the man who has kept them all night is at the top of the service stair going up to his own bed. Patrick has been standing a minute with Robert in front of the first furnace. They have watched together the fire settle to its morning rate. The coal is drawing evenly. The mica window in the door of the first furnace glows a steady orange. Robert has his shovel in his hand, and he sets it back on the rack, and he sits on the stool by the pine table. Patrick nods to him. He picks up his tin lunch pail from the corner where it has sat all night. He picks up his book from the pine table. He puts it under his arm. He takes his soft cap from the peg by the door. He goes up the 3 or 4 steps and out into the corridor. He walks along the basement corridor softly, in the way of a man who has walked it in soft leather boots for 8 years. He passes the china room. He passes the silver room. He passes the housekeeper's office where Margaret is at her desk, with the watchman's paper disc in her hand. He passes the door at the foot of the servant's stair. He begins to climb. 2 flights of the plain narrow stair. He goes slowly. He is tired now, in the good way a man is tired after a night of steady work, and his legs are heavier than they were at 10 last night. He reaches the last landing. He opens the door to the servants' floor. He steps out into the long, low corridor. The corridor is a little warmer than it was in the deep night, because the risers are up to the morning rate and the small warm air is climbing higher along the service walls. He walks down the corridor to his own door. He does not pass Bridget's door because his room is on the other side, but he walks past several closed doors where the men and women who have slept the night still sleep because their day has not yet begun. He opens his own door. He steps inside. He closes the door behind him softly. He sets his tin lunch pail on the small deal table by the window. He sets his book on the small shelf above the bed. He hangs his soft cap on the peg by the door. He takes off his canvas jacket and hangs it on the peg beside the cap. He unties the leather thong that holds his apron string and he folds the apron and lays it over the chair. He walks to the dormer window. The window looks inward onto the concealed central well of the roofline, and beyond the well, past the far side of the roof, at the small strip of sky visible above the balustrade, he can see the first grey of the day. Below the sky, snow is beginning to fall. Not heavily. A slow, soft fall of small flakes, sifting past the dormer glass, catching for a second on the lead roof outside, drifting on. He watches the snow for a moment. He does not think about anything in particular. He is a man watching snow. He turns from the window. He sits on the edge of his bed. He unlaces his boots. He sets them under the bed. He does not undress further. He pulls back the coverlet and the blanket beneath it, and he lies down in his shirt and trousers, on his back with his hands folded on his chest. He is warm. Under him, 4 floors down, in the low whitewashed vault at the foot of the north wing, the 2 great furnaces are drawing steady on their morning rate. The warmth he has kept going all night is coming up through the floors. It is coming through the ground floor staterooms where Mary and Ellen are finishing their dusting. It is coming through the family floor bedrooms where the shutters remain latched and the beds remain empty, and the panels are cool to the touch, but not cold. It is coming through the ceiling of the family floor and into the pine floorboards of the servants' floor, and along the wall by his bed, and up into the pine boards under the frame of his small iron bedstead. And through the pine boards, in a small, slow rising quiet, the warmth is coming into the soles of his tired feet. He does not think about it. He feels it. He feels it in the way a body feels a good known thing, the warmth of a fire he has tended. Who keeps a marble house warm while it sleeps and is never seen? That was the small question at the beginning of the night. There is your answer. A small crew of good men in a warm bright room under the lawn, whose only trace tonight is the heat rising up through your floor. He is asleep in a minute. He does not know he is asleep. He is only warm and still, and the snow is still falling past the dormer glass, and below him the fires are drawing steady, and the day staff are at their work, and the great pavilion he has kept alive all night is entering its next day without him, and it is his day of sleep now. The house he kept alive all night stands, tonight, on Bellevue Avenue in Newport, exactly where we left it. It stands there in the winter of 2026. It stands there in the summer. It stands there when the wind is off the sea and when the sea is still. It was bought by the Preservation Society of Newport County in 1962, when Julia Berwind's estate was settled, and it was saved from a proposed demolition, and it was opened to visitors as a museum in the same decade. It is a National Historic Landmark. On any ordinary day of the year, if you go to Newport, you can walk in through the vestibule, cross the great black and white marble floor, stand in the ballroom under the 2 gardens, walk through the walnut dining room and the Louis salons and the Chinese breakfast room, and stand at the tall windows and look out at the frozen lawn. More than that, if you take what the Preservation Society calls its servant life tour, you can go down. You can walk the same service stair. You can walk the basement corridor. You can stand in the coal vault. You can stand in the boiler room, in front of the 2 great furnaces, on the pale grey tile floor. You can walk out along the tunnel where John and the boy wheeled the cart and where Patrick wheeled the ash. You can climb the servants' stair to the top floor and see Bridget's small room with its small iron bedstead. It is all still there. The pushcart, the furnace doors, the annunciator board with its brass bells, the small pine table in the corner of the boiler room, the small dormer windows of the servants' floor, the small kindnesses of a house that was kept for 6 decades by a small crew of good people, and the language of the world we have been inside tonight is still in your own mouth. When you say Gilded Age, you are quoting Mark Twain from the title of his novel of 1873. When you say upstairs, downstairs, you are speaking the plain American description of the house we have just walked. When you say the 400, you are naming, without knowing it, the list of who mattered in New York in the winter. Hermione Berwind's white Boldini portrait was painted. The words are still in your mouth. The house is still on the avenue. The tunnel is still under the lawn. The furnaces are steady. The rounds are being walked. The house is warm at every level. The gates are closed, the coal is drawing steady, and the house will keep till morning. Sleep well, friend. If any small part of tonight stayed with you, I would love to know, down in the comments, which part it was. If this is the kind of history that helps you fall asleep, a like and a subscribe help these long histories find the people who want them whenever you're ready. Next time, we go out on the sea a while, on the deck of a Fall River Palace steamer at midnight, a calm crossing down the Sound to Newport. Until then, sleep well.